Alhamdulillah wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'een. Today is our second gathering in covering the book or the poem by Sheikh Amir Bahjat, An-Nadhm Al-Bayyin. We said it's a 50-line poem, introductory poem into the Ḥanbalī madhab. Yesterday the plan was to cover a lot more, but we did not reach where we wanted to. So today we are going to be starting from line 11. Yesterday we took the muqaddimat to fiqh, like the pre-concepts that you should learn before actually starting the poem. And then we took al-Wudu, the conditions and the furud. So today we are going to begin by taking the things that nullify wudu. The things that nullify wudu. قال الناظم حفظه الله تعالى ينقضه الخارج من سبيل كالنجس الكثير لا القليل ومس فرج دبرا أو قبلا بيده ولمس أنثى رجلا. طيب, we'll take these two lines. He says, it is nullified, meaning wudu, by anything that exits from the bodily passages, like it is nullified by a large amount of najasa, a physical impurity, not a small amount. طيب, let's take these two. He mentions two nullifiers of wudu, two things that break wudu. The first one he says is anything that exits from the bodily passages, meaning the back or front passage. Anything that exits from the front or back passage, it breaks your wudu. It what? It breaks your wudu. And when we say anything, we mean whether it's something that normally exits or usually doesn't exit. Whether it's something that is impure or something that is pure. Whether it is a little, even the smallest amount of something, it will break your wudu. For example, a worm exits from the front or the back passage. That breaks wudu. A kidney stone, it breaks wudu. And obviously urine, and of course that would break wudu. Passing gas, does it break wudu? Yes, it breaks wudu because it exits from the back passage. So anything that exits from the back or the front passage, it breaks wudu no matter what. Whether it's a little or a lot or pure, impure, pure as we mentioned. But the second thing he says is, and we're going to try to move a little quicker than yesterday, and we're going to push questions to the end. So if you guys have questions, just write them down so that you don't forget them. He says, like it is nullified by a large amount of najasa, a physical impurity, not a small amount. He's saying that if something exits now from the other parts of the body, right? Something exits from another part of the body other than two passages. In order for it to break wudu, it has to, number one, be najis. It's not just anything that exits, right? It has to be something that is najis, something that is impure. There are certain things in the sharia that are impure. And when we say impure, we mean in the sharia, not what we consider impure. For example, someone may consider mucus or snot to be like, oh, disgusting. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about in the sharia, this is something that is impure. What are the things that are impure that can exit from the body? Other than two passages, it would be blood, vomit, and pus. These three things. So if blood comes out of a person, or he vomits, or pus comes out, these are three things that are najis that usually come out from other areas of the body. For blood, there is an exception. He mentions it here. He says it has to be a large amount. It cannot be a small amount. So if a small amount of blood comes out, does that break wudu? No. It has to be a lot. A small amount of vomit comes out, does that break wudu? No. What does that mean? What is small and what is a lot? They mentioned that whatever ما يفحش في نفس كل أحد بحسبه, the person who the blood came out of, or the pus came out of, or the vomit came out of, would he consider that a lot? What does he consider? Does he consider that a lot? If he would say that's considered a lot, then it would break his wudu. If he doesn't consider it to be a lot, then it would not. So some people, like a little bit of blood comes out, or he pops a pimple maybe, that's not going to really break your wudu. But now if you have a lot of blood, where it's like, well, this is considered a lot of blood, that would break your wudu. So some people, while they're praying, they might start bleeding. And then they're thinking, is my salah valid? Is my wudu broken? Your wudu is valid as long as it's a little bit. If it's a lot, it breaks the wudu. طيب. He says, وَمَسُّ فَرْجٍ دُبُرًا أَوْ قُبُلَ بِيَدِهِ وَلَمْسُ أُنْثَى رَجُلًا. Again, he mentions two more here. So we said there's 8 nullifiers. We mentioned 2. Now number 3, he says, by touching the private part, whether back or front. So a person touching the front passage or the back passage. The back passage or his front private part. This breaks wudu, but there are conditions. There are conditions. Number 1, he says mess. The author, he said the word mess. There's a difference between lems and mess. Who knows the difference? Mess is with your hand. So you only break wudu by touching the front or back passage if it is with your hand. Your hand would include from your wrist and upward. It has to be with your hand, whether the back side or the front side, your palm or the top of your hand. Some madhahib, they say only one side. The Ḥanbalī madhab, anywhere in your hand. If you touch it, it's going to break the wudu. Except the nails. The nails do not break it. If you touch it with your nail, it does not break the wudu. It has to be the actual hand. Number 2, it has to be a human being's private part. It cannot be, for example, an animal or something else other than a human being. It has to be a human being, whether it is your own or someone else's. Whether it's your own or someone else's. And here we're not saying that, oh, this is halal or this is haram. We're not talking about that. We're talking about what is the ruling. Because if someone does something haram, he touches, for example, someone else's private part in a haram way or his own, that may or not be halal. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about if he does it, there is still a ruling that is attached to it, whether it's haram or not. So we have to know the rulings of these things. The third one is that there cannot be a barrier. It has to be direct skin-to-skin contact. If he has a glove or he has cloth or he has something in between, it does not break the wudu. It has to be direct skin-to-skin contact. And it is with desire or not, whether there is desire or not. Some of the madhahib, they say if you touch the private part with desire. The Ḥanbalī madhab is that even if there is no desire, it breaks wudu. And whether it's accidental or not, or intentional, even if it's accidental. And we should note that when we say back passage, it is not the outside of his back passage, rather it is the opening hole of the back passage, specifically the hole that breaks wudu. Anything other than that would not break the wudu. And there's an athar I want to mention, because some topics in fiqh, some people may get uncomfortable, right? Because you're talking about certain things that are a little uncomfortable. But when it comes to learning, a person should not be shy to speak about these things, and he should not be uncomfortable. And obviously, at the same time, you want to watch the words that you say and try to be, conscious of that. But if you need to be explicit in certain things, you have to be explicit, otherwise people will not understand. And Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, رحم الله نساء الأنصار لم يمنعهن الحياء أن يتفقهن في الدين. She said that may Allah have mercy on the women of the Ansar. Their shyness and modesty did not prevent them from learning the religion. So they had shyness, but when it came to learning the religion, that shyness did not prevent them from asking the questions that they had. So that would be a shyness that is looked down upon. And I think Ibn Abbas, he mentioned, لا يتعلم المستحي والمستكبر. There are two people who do not learn. Who are they? The one who is shy and the one who is arrogant. The one who is arrogant because he feels, I don't need to ask. I already know everything. He doesn't want to ask because he doesn't want to show that he doesn't know. And the one who is shy, he will never learn because he's too scared to ask. So when it comes to learning, we should not have shyness. طيب. The fourth one after that, after touching the private part, whether the front or the back, with your hand, we mentioned, is a man or a woman touching one another. A man or a woman touching one another. There are conditions again for this. So if a man touches a woman, or a woman touches a man, we're going to mention the conditions. Number 1, here it's lems. We said the difference between mess and lems is any part of the body. It's not specific to your hand. So even if a man touched a woman with another part of the body, that would also break the wudu. And here the condition is that it has to be with desire. It has to be with shahwa. If a man just touches his wife normally, right, there is no breaking of wudu. But if there is desire, that breaks wudu. Is it only touching his wife with desire or any woman? any woman. And like we mentioned, this may be something haram, but there is still a fiqh ruling. If a man touches a woman that is not his wife with desire, that's haram, there's no doubt. But there is still a fiqh ruling that we have to learn that comes with that, which is that the wudu breaks. طيب, so there has to be desire. So for touching the private part, it's desire or not. For touching a person of the opposite gender, there has to be desire. طيب. Again, has to be no barrier. So if there is a barrier, for example, he touches her clothes, right? He doesn't touch her skin directly, or he uses a cloth to touch her. He doesn't touch her directly. There's no skin to skin. The wudu is not broken. And the hair, the nails, and the teeth are not included. These three things, right? For example, if it would be hard, I don't even know how you would do that, but let's say someone touches another person's hair with desire, that would not break the wudu. And the hair, and the nails, and the teeth as well. طيب. Also, very, very important point. It is the one who is touching, not the one being touched. Even if the one who gets touched, there is desire. You look, it's only for the one who's touching, okay? So for example, a man touches his wife. He doesn't have desire, she does. What happens? No one's wudu breaks. Because we said the person, al-malmus, la yantaqid wudu'uhu mutlaqa. The person being touched, his wudu never breaks, no matter what. His wudu does not break. It is always the person who is touching. So these conditions we mentioned, for having the desire is for the person touching. So if a person touches his wife with desire, his wudu breaks, even if she has desire. طيب. Then he says, وَعَكْسُهُ بِشَهْوَةٍ. He's continuing. نعم. So either or, whether a man touches a woman or a woman touches a man. طيب, what if a woman touches a woman or a man touches a man and there's desire? It doesn't break wudu. It doesn't break wudu. طيب. وَعَكْسُهُ بِشَهْوَةٍ. نعم. And then he says, كالأكل للحم إبل وزوال العقل. He mentions two more. He says, eating camel meat, specifically the meat of the camel, it is something that breaks wudu because there is a hadith that mentions this. And this is something that it's called ta'abbudi. It's called ta'abbudi. This is hukum ta'abbudi. What does that mean? That means there's no logical reason that we can understand and we can see from this. A person might try to infer and guess, but ultimately there's no reason that we can ultimately see for this. So some things, for example, dhuhr salah is 4 rak'ahs and not 3 or not 2. Why is that? Is there a reason? There is a reason. There's no doubt Allah puts everything for a reason. Is there a reason we can comprehend or understand? Not really. You do tawaf 7 times around the Kaaba. Why 7? Why not 8? Why not 6? These are called things that are ta'abbudi. They're not ma'qul al-ma'na. We cannot understand the reason behind them. But that doesn't mean there is not a reason. There, of course, is a reason. So eating camel meat is one of those things that the scholars mention is ta'abbudi, that you do it and we don't really know the reason. Whether it is raw or cooked, some people maybe they like to eat meat raw, so that would break your wudu as well. And it's nothing else, it's only the meat. So the milk, if a person drinks the milk of a camel, it does not break the wudu. If he eats the liver of a camel, that would not break the wudu. It would be the actual meat. طيب. That's the 5th one. And if I remember correctly, this is from the mufradat of the Hanabila. This is from the things that are unique to the Ḥanbalī madhab. So the other madhab, they don't agree with this. Na'am. The next one he says, وَزَوَالِ الْعَقْلِ. Losing one's consciousness. Basically, sanity or consciousness going away. This includes 4 things. 4 types of people. Number 1, a person who has went insane. He's majnoon. He's lost his mind. Like he's literally insane. A person who has fainted. A person who is intoxicated. This falls onto this. And also a person who goes to sleep. While he's sleeping, he's considered that his aql is not there. So all of these things break wudu. All of these things. If a person, he passes out, does his wudu break? Yes. A person, he gets intoxicated, does his wudu break? Yes. Person goes insane, does his wudu break? Yes. A person goes to sleep, does his wudu break? Yes, but there's details. For the sleep, we have some exceptions. The other three, there are no exceptions. Even if he passes out for 1 second, wudu is gone. But for sleep, there are some exceptions we're going to mention. There's some details. What is the exception? Bear with me now. The exception is that if it is a light sleep from a person who is sitting or standing, okay? It has two conditions have to be met. It has to be a light sleep, and it has to be from someone who is sitting or standing. Like if he's sitting but it's a deep sleep, it breaks wudu. If he's standing and it's a deep sleep, it breaks wudu. If he's laying down and it's a light sleep, it breaks wudu. The exception is only for the person sitting or standing and it is light. It has to meet these two conditions. Okay? Na'am. So a person is sitting and he falls asleep but it's a light sleep, his wudu is considered valid. Here's the question: what is considered a light sleep or a deep sleep? A lot of these things, when they mention a lot or a little or light or not light, usually it goes back to what people would consider to be a light sleep or a deep sleep. But in this mas'ala, some of them they mentioned that it is a deep sleep if he cannot hear or understand. If he cannot hear or understand, it's considered a deep sleep. It would be a light sleep if he can hear but he can't understand. Right? He hears noise but he doesn't know what's going on. That shows that it's a light sleep. And if he can hear and understand, he's not even asleep. Like some of them mentioned that. But it would go back to what people would normally consider a light or deep sleep. طيب. The seventh one, he says, وَغَسْلِ مَيِّتٍ. نعم. He says, the washing of the deceased. So when a person dies, and someone is washing his body, the person washing his body, that breaks his wudu. Right? So if a person died, and let's say you're washing the body, your wudu breaks because you touched the dead body. You are washing the body. But we have to note, it's not the one pouring the water, because there might be someone pouring the water and another person washing. It's the person who is actually touching the dead person. Now there was a question that came to me while I was researching this, and I couldn't find an answer, but inshallah we'll try to find the answer after. Is it skin to skin here, or even with a barrier? Because usually when they wash a body, if I'm not mistaken, they have a glove or something that they use. It's usually not skin to skin. So I'm not sure if the condition is it has to be skin to skin or even with a barrier. But umuman in general, that washing the body would necessitate wudu for the one washing it. Then he says, وَمُوجِبَاتِ غُسْلٍ وَلَا تَسْأَلْ سِوَى الثِّقَاتِ. And then he says, in that which obligates ghusl, and do not ask anyone other than trustworthy. So he mentions the last one here, which is anything that makes ghusl wajib. We didn't cover what makes ghusl wajib yet, it's going to come after. But anything that makes ghusl wajib, that breaks your ghusl, it makes wudu wajib. It breaks your wudu. For example, a person has intercourse. It's going to come that's something that breaks. It requires that you make ghusl. طيب, does that break your wudu as well? Or do I say, no, I don't have ghusl but I have wudu? It's not how it works. Anything that requires you to make ghusl, requires you to make wudu, it breaks your wudu. طيب. And then the Shaykh, he says, وَلَا تَسْأَلْ سِوَى الثِّقَاتِ. And do not ask anyone than the trustworthy. What does this have to do with anything? He's trying to finish the line of poetry, so he has to mention something. So he mentions, and do not ask anyone other than the trustworthy. And this is actually an important point, because the Shaykh is telling us that when you take and you have questions regarding the deen, do not just go to anyone and ask. Ask those who are specialized in this field. Right? Just like if you had a medical question, you're not just going to go to any random person, right? Because it's something you value, your body and your health. But what's more important, your physical health or your spiritual health? No doubt your spiritual health. So when it comes to matters of the deen, we should take it even more serious in who we ask. So we should go to those who have studied and have knowledge. No. So those are the things that break al-wudu. We mentioned 8 things. Are there any questions with these 8 very quickly? If a question comes to you while I'm saying it, write it down. Otherwise, you're going to forget it. Any questions on this? واضح? Should I test you guys? طيب. Let's continue. He says, وَيُمْنَعُ الْمُحْدِثُ مَسَّ الْمُصْحَفِ وَمِنْ طَوَافٍ وَصَلَاةٍ فَعْرِفِ. He mentions now the things that are haram for a person who doesn't have wudu. A person doesn't have wudu. There are certain things he cannot do. There are certain things he cannot do. What are these things? He says the first one is touching the mushaf. The second one is doing tawaf, and the third one is salah. Tawaf and salah is clear. Tawaf and salah is clear. If you're praying and you don't have wudu, your salah is not valid. And praying the salah without wudu is a major sin. If a person knowingly doesn't have wudu and he continues to pray. And some of them even said it's kufr. They said it's an act of kufr. Why? Because it is as if he's mocking the prayer and mocking the deen. Because he knows he doesn't have wudu, but he continues to pray. So a person, he shouldn't have shyness and be like, oh, what are people going to think of me? They're going to see that I broke my wudu during prayer. He shouldn't care about that. And some scholars, they mentioned, I don't know if it was Hanabila, but some scholars, they mentioned if a person, he has that shyness, he can put his mouth on his hand on his nose to make it seem that his nose is bleeding. Right? If he doesn't want people to know. But in any case, there's no reason to be shy about it. But at the moment a person, even if he's leading salah, if his wudu breaks, he needs to leave. Do not continue that salah, it's a grave sin. Type in tawaf as well. If you're doing tawaf and you lose wudu, or you didn't have wudu before, the tawaf is not valid. So let's say, as you guys know, you have to do 7 rounds for tawaf. Let's say a person is on the 6th one and his wudu breaks. Afterwards he makes wudu, does he have to restart from number 1, or can he just continue from the last round he started from? He has to restart from 0. طيب. Now we're going to take the first one, we skipped it, which is touching the mushaf. A lot of people today are lenient on this, on touching the mushaf without wudu. And for you guys' information, this is an issue that the four madhahib have agreed upon is haram. The four madhahib say you cannot touch the mushaf without wudu. But there are some other scholars other than the four madhahib, or maybe there's another opinion in the madhahib that you can touch the mushaf without wudu. But it's a minority opinion. And there's no doubt that touching the mushaf with wudu is safer. So do not be lenient on this issue, especially when the four madhahib have agreed upon that you cannot touch the wudu without the mushaf. طيب, what about using the phone? You have the mushaf on the phone and you don't have wudu. Is it allowed or not allowed? What do you guys think? It's allowed. But there's a difference of opinion even amongst the scholars today, but most of them, they say it's allowed. It is allowed. So what about touching the mushaf with a barrier? You have gloves on, or you have like a cloth that you're using the mushaf. What do you guys think? Allowed or no? It's allowed. It's touching the mushaf directly. The cover? Naam. Allahu alam, that falls into the mushaf. It's part of the mushaf. Naam. In any case, even I'm not 100% sure, but from what I remember, yes. But to be safe, don't do it. No. If you really need to touch the mushaf, you don't have wudu, use your sleeves or use something. Or no. طيب. By the way, they mentioned that books of tafsir, for example, if there's a tafsir that has a mushaf in it, it would not fall under it. Because it's not considered a mushaf. People consider it tafsir, so it wouldn't fall into that. طيب. We're going into the chapter of al-ghusl. Now we finish al-wudu, alhamdulillah, we're going to take al-ghusl. We mentioned that al-tahara is what? Lifting the state of impurity, spiritual impurity, and removing physical impurity. And we mentioned that when it comes to the state of spiritual impurity, there are 2 types. There's a minor and there's a major. The minor one is anything that requires you to make wudu, and the major is anything that requires you to make ghusl. So now he finished talking about the minor state of impurity. He's going to talk about the major one. He says, فَصْلٌ وَفَرْضُ الْغُسْلِ عَنْ إِنزَالِهِ بِلَذَّةٍ لِلْمَنِيِّ وَانْتِقَالِهِ. He says the section of ghusl, it is obligated by ejaculation of mani, with pleasure, and it's moving from its origin. Like he mentions the first thing that makes ghusl necessary. Number 1, what is ghusl? What is the definition of ghusl? غسل is استعمال ماء طهور في جميع بدنه على وجه مخصوص. It is that you're using water Because just think about logically, what is ghusl? You're taking water that is ma' tahur, that is tahur, purifying, on your entire body. You're washing your entire body in a specific manner, ala wajh makhsus. So it is using water to wash your entire body in a specific manner. We're going to talk about it more. So he mentions that ghusl is obligated by ejaculation of many with pleasure, and it's moving from its origin. You have to note something. When he's saying it's obligatory, does that mean right after a person does something that breaks his ghusl, he has to make ghusl? For example, a person, mani came out. We're going to talk about what mani is. It came out. Does he have to do ghusl right away? No, he doesn't have to. But what he means is that it's obligatory. Yani if he wants to go pray or do something that requires him to have wudu, he needs to now make ghusl. But it doesn't mean in that specific moment he has to make ghusl. طيب. Number one, he says, many coming out with pleasure. طيب, what is many? Many is seminal discharge or fluid or semen. Right? And as we mentioned, some topics it may get uncomfortable for people, but we need to be clear in these issues. Right? If I'm not clear with my words, you may misunderstand me and then you may be practicing things incorrectly. There's no shyness in learning. So many is seminal discharge, or the seminal fluid that comes out of a man or a woman when the shahwa, when the desire is strong. طيب, he mentions that when it comes out with pleasure, it has to come out with pleasure. Is it possible to come out without pleasure? Yes. Maybe a person has a sickness or something like that. In that case, it would not require ghusl. When it comes out with pleasure, it requires ghusl. طيب. And he says it's movement. If it moves, what does that mean? It is possible that many moves in a person's body and it does not exit. For example, a person, he's about to release many, but he holds himself back and it doesn't release. In that case, the movement, even if it didn't exit, he still has to do ghusl. So it's whether it comes out or it moves. طيب. What if, okay, there's something I didn't mention, or we're going to mention after. طيب, I'll give you a scenario. A person, the mani starts moving in his body and is about to exit, but he holds himself back. It does not exit. We said ghusl is wajib upon him, yes or no? Yes. He does ghusl, he finishes his ghusl, and after the ghusl, mani comes out. What do you guys think? Does he have to do ghusl? The mani came out after he did ghusl. There's no pleasure. There's no pleasure now when it came out. Now it leaked out. There's no pleasure. So now he doesn't have to do ghusl. He already did the ghusl. طيب, but he would have to do wudu. Why does he have to do wudu? It's not najis. What's the first naqd? The first thing that breaks wudu is what? Anything that exits from the back or front passage. So it exited from the front passage, so it breaks wudu. But it does not require ghusl in that case, if it comes out without pleasure. طيب, there's one exception for the rule of pleasure. One second, after. There's one exception for the condition of pleasure, which is the person who's sleeping. Right? A person is sleeping, he may not remember, there may be no pleasure. In this case, if he wakes up and he sees that many came out, he has to make ghusl, even if he doesn't remember the pleasure or there was no pleasure. You had a question?
Yeah. So you have to clean the discharge?
طيب. In the madhab, there's a difference of opinion among the scholars. The discharge, the mani, right? We're talking about seminal discharge, not pre-seminal discharge. There's a difference. Seminal discharge, semen, it is tahir in the madhab. It is pure. So he does not have to clean it. For example, gets on his clothes, he does not have to clean it. All right? Does he have to do istinja? Like, does he have to clean his private part? That's a good question. We mentioned that you do istinja for everything except passing gas, but there were other exceptions that they mentioned. For example, they mentioned if something tahir comes out. So many, you would not have to wash it for the wudu to be valid. You would not have to wash it to do wudu to be valid. And if it got on your clothes, you do not have to wash the clothes to pray in them, because it is tahir. Right? But the pre-seminal fluid, it is najis. So for the pre-seminal fluid, you would have to wash yourself and you would have to wash the clothes. طيب. So again, we make the exception for pleasure if a person is sleeping. Right? If a person is sleeping, no matter what, if he realizes that many came out, he has to do ghusl. طيب. We mentioned two. We mentioned many coming out and its movement, even if it doesn't come out. The third one, they say, وَحَيْضٍ نِفَاسٍ وَكَذَا الْإِسْلَامُ وَالْوَطْءُ وَالْمَوْتُ وَقُلْ حَرَامُ. طيب. He says, menstruation, right? When a woman, she menstruates, when she finishes her cycle, she is required to make ghusl. It's clear. She is required to make ghusl. And also they mention postpartum bleeding. Right? If a woman, when she gives birth and she bleeds, she has to do ghusl for the blood that came out. طيب, if a woman gives birth and she doesn't bleed, there's no ghusl that is required. It is for the blood that came out. طيب, there's no ghusl required in that case. But if blood comes out, she has to do ghusl. طيب, and then he mentions وَالْإِسْلَامُ, likewise a person entering Islam. When a person becomes a Muslim, he has to do ghusl. Even when he was not a Muslim, even if he did not do anything to require ghusl, when he becomes a Muslim, he is required to do al-ghusl. And there's a difference of opinion, but the madhab is that he's required to. Even if a person apostated, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, a person is a Muslim, then he leaves Islam, maybe for 5 minutes, and then he comes back. He did not do anything that requires ghusl, he still has to do ghusl. طيب. And then he says, وَالْوَطْءُ, an intercourse. Right? If a male, if he penetrates his private part into a female, or even, we're going to mention the conditions, intercourse requires ghusl. There are conditions. Number one, even if he does not ejaculate, even if nothing comes out, just the mere penetration requires ghusl. Even in the backside, penetration of the backside requires ghusl. And as we mentioned, it's not that it's halal, it's something is haram. But there is still a ruling, a fiqh ruling we need to know if it happens. Right? There's still a fiqh ruling. For example, a person may be doing these acts, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, and then he wants to pray. He needs to know the ruling. It's still required for him to do al-ghusl. They mention even in an animal, if he penetrates an animal. And again, these are not things that are halal, but we have to know the rulings because these are things that people actually do. And this is something, there's a hadith about this happening in the Prophet ﷺ's time. So what do you think about our time? They say even if it is a dead corpse, a dead body. The main one that we should be concerned about, even if there is no fluid that comes out, there's no ejaculation, he's still required to make al-ghusl. The last one he says, وَالْمَوْتُ. نعم. He says, and death. And death. A person dies, a ghusl has to be made on him. Obviously, he cannot do ghusl for himself, but it is required for the people to do ghusl for him. And it is actually a fard kifaya. This we talked about yesterday, fard ayn, fard kifaya. Things that are a communal obligation and things that are individual obligation. Washing the dead body and doing ghusl for the dead body, is it communal? Is it obligatory on the community or on every single person? The community. Meaning if enough people do it, if someone does it, the sin is lifted from the rest. And they mention an exception to this, which is the person who is a shaheed in the battlefield. If he died, he is not to be washed. And also a person who was killed unjustly. For example, he was defending himself or defending his family. He is not washed. Right? Why is he not washed? We have a qa'idah that says it is not recommended to remove, or it is recommended to leave any athar of ibadah, any trace of worship, it is recommended to leave it. For example, they mention that a person when he's fasting, after dhuhr, like closer to maghrib time, it is disliked for him to use the miswak. Why is that? Because there is a hadith that mentions that the smell of a fasting person is what? Beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we do not want to remove the athar, the trace of the worship, the act of worship. Na'am. So the same thing in this case. A shaheed, the blood is a sign of his worship. So they do not want to remove it. So they say that it is recommended to put him in the grave without being washed. Na'am. And what's another example of? Go ahead.
I was going to ask, I know of a person who, before he was Muslim, he was maybe into gang stuff. He became Muslim for a while, for a few years, and they basically came and they shot him maybe a dozen times. Should he have a ghusl or not? If he wasn't necessarily...
Yeah, so he would fall under a person, they say a person who was killed unjustly. So he would fall under that. Unless like he initiated and then they're fighting, that may be different. But if he's, for example, just walking and they come and shoot him, Allahu A'lam, it would seem that it comes under that. But they mentioned that this is makruh, it's disliked to do it. But if they did wash him, there's no sin. It's fine to wash him, but it would be better to put him straight in the grave. That's not a fatwa, this is just, yeah. طيب. These are the things that break or require a person to do ghusl. Then he says, he talks about the things that are impermissible to do while you are in a state of impurity, major impurity. If you are in a state of major impurity, there are certain things that are haram upon you. Just like the person who is in minor impurity, he cannot touch the mushaf, he cannot pray, he cannot fast. When a person is in major impurity, what can't he do? He says, مكث الذي يلزمه في المسجد كذا تلاوة كتاب الصمد. He says, for a person who is required to do ghusl, to remain in a masjid, likewise to recite the book of al-Samad, meaning the Quran, is haram. It's not allowed for him to do these things. He mentions two things: staying in the masjid and reading Quran. The first one he says is staying in the masjid. He says mukth. Mukth means staying or remaining. So what does that remove? A person who's just passing by. For example, a person is quickly passing. Like back in the day, for example, a person is walking and he's taking a route. Sometimes the masjid would be in the route. So for him to not go through the masjid, he would have to go all the way around. It would take much longer. So him going through the masjid would be quicker. So in that case, they mentioned it is allowed for him to pass by the masjid, like quickly go in and out. And even if he's in a state of major impurity. But to stay in the masjid is not allowed. طيب. And some of them, they mention that for passing by, even if there's no need, even if you don't have a need, you can pass by. طيب. What about remaining in the masjid? طيب, number one, a person who's going to be in a state of major impurity, usually it's going to be a person who he's in a state of janaba. Right? He just had intercourse, or a mani came out. So he's in a state of janaba, or a woman who is menstruating. These are probably the two most common cases. So what is the ruling for them in staying in the masjid? For the person who is in a state of janaba, he's in a state of major impurity due to the exiting of mani or intercourse, he's only allowed to go in the masjid and stay in the masjid if he makes wudu. If he makes wudu, now he's allowed to stay in the masjid. They mentioned this exception. But if he doesn't make wudu, he's not allowed to stay in the masjid. So for example, a person is doing i'tikaf, and let's say he sleeps and he has a wet dream and he's in a state of major impurity. Does he have to leave? No, as long as he does wudu, he can stay. طيب. What about the woman who is menstruating? They mentioned two things. That number one, she must have wudu. Just like the person who is in a state of janaba, he has to have wudu. She also has to have wudu if she wants to come in the masjid. And number one, the blood has to cut off. The blood actually has to cut off. We're not talking about she puts something to stop the blood from flowing. No, the blood actually has to stop for her to be able to stay in the masjid. And of course, some modern day scholars, they allowed for a woman, even if she's menstruating. But the safer option is that a woman, she does not go into the masjid if she is menstruating, unless with these two conditions. She makes wudu and the blood cut off. And one of my mashayikh, he said to me that this is This is a mas'ala, an issue that a lot of women, they take lightly. وَلَا يَنْبَغِي ذَلك, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. No. طيب, then he says, كَذَا تِلَاوَةُ كِتَابِ الصَّمَدِ. He says also reading the Quran, reciting the Quran is not allowed in a state of major impurity. Whether it's due to menstruation or he's in a state of, or a man is in a state of janaba. He cannot read the Quran. طيب. But this is also something that we should be careful of. طيب, what if he reads the Quran with intention of dua or dhikr? For example, a person is in a state of major impurity and he's about to sleep. And as we know, there are du'as and ayat that you read before you sleep. Is it allowed? In this case, it is allowed. Why? Because he's not intending to read Quran. Rather, his intention is that dhikr. Is for dhikr. So in this case, it is allowed. For example, a person died and he says, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. This is part of the Quran, but it is allowed because he's not intending Quran. طيب. And by the way, this is according to all the madhahib. All the madhahib say that a person who is in a state of major impurity cannot read Quran. But there are some certain scholars that allow this. Some of them, a person may say, the woman, she cannot read Quran. Because obviously if a man is in a state of janaba, he can do ghusl and khalas, he can go back to reading Quran. But a woman, maybe for 1 week, she cannot read the Quran. This may be difficult on her. What does she do? Some of them mentioned exceptions. They said, for example, a woman who is a Quran teacher, for her we can make an exception. Or a woman who fears forgetting her Quran, if she fears that she's going to forget Quran. Some of them mentioned you can make an exception for that. Otherwise, she should not read the Quran. She doesn't fall into those categories. And there are other things that a woman can do while she's menstruating. Right? Maybe she cannot read the Quran, but she can listen to Quran. She can read with her eyes. She can also move her lips without letting sound out. Because when we say reading Quran, it means that sound is actually coming out. For example, a person just moves his lips. That is not considered reading Quran. And by the way, if the person is trying to read Quran, this is important, and he's just moving his lips, there's no sound, he's not getting the reward for reading every letter. He's not getting the reward. Actually, there has to be sound that comes out. And even in salah, sometimes people pray and you see them and their mouth is closed. And you ask them, I remember it happened, I asked someone, did you read the surahs that you're supposed to? Or the adhkar, the Subhana Rabbil Azim, Subhana. He said, yeah, I read it in my head. It's not allowed. It's not allowed to read it in your head. You actually have to say it. And sound has to come out. And some scholars said, as long as you're moving your lips, you're fine. Sound doesn't actually have to come out, but a person, he should let sound out to be safe. And when we say sound, this is important, especially in salah. Some people, they're so loud to the point the person next to them cannot focus. When we say sound, they mention that it should just be loud enough for you to hear yourself. Right? But the person next to you should not necessarily hear you, or maybe very faintly he hears you, because it would be difficult that the person right next to you doesn't hear you at all. But in general, you should only be loud to the point where you hear yourself. Where you hear yourself. Like, what if you're in an area where it's super loud and you can't hear yourself? Do I have to raise my voice now to be able to hear myself? No. They mentioned that in a normal environment, if you speak in this, for example, this pitch, you hear yourself. Even if now you're in a loud area, you don't have to raise your voice as long as you're at that level. طيب. So in a normal environment, if you spoke like this, would you hear yourself? That is what is considered actual speaking recitation. طيب. So those are the things that are haram for a person who is in a state of major impurity. So for minor impurity, we said 3 things. For major impurity, 2 more things. So total, there are 5. So actually, the person who's in a major impurity, there are 5 things he can't do. The 3 that he can't do because he doesn't have wudu. Because if he can't do it with wudu, min bab awla, yani from a greater point of view, if he doesn't have ghusl, he can't do it. Right? Because not having ghusl is greater than not having wudu. So we said for wudu, he cannot touch the mushaf, he cannot pray, and he cannot do tawaf. So likewise, a person who is in a state of major impurity, those 3 things he cannot do. He cannot touch the mushaf. Then he cannot read the Quran, as we mentioned with the detail that we mentioned. Then the author, he says, وَفَرْضُهُ تَعْمِيمُ جِسْمِهِ بِمَا وَالشَّرْطُ وَالْوَاجِبُ كَالْوُضُوهُمَا. He says, its fard is to wash the entire body with water, and its conditions and wajib are the same as wudu. طيب, in wudu, we mentioned there are conditions, and there are what? What else is there with wudu? We have conditions of wudu, we have obligations, and we have wajibat. Three things. Things that are conditions, things that are obligatory, and things that are wajib. And we mentioned the difference. Very quickly, I'll mention again. Conditions, they are before the act and during the act, and they're not actually part of the act itself. Okay? They have to be there before and they have to be there during, but they're not actually part of the act. Whereas an obligation, it is an actual part of the action. But it's not, it doesn't have to be there before, it's only there during. And we said wajib, something that's wajib, it's just like a fard, in that it's part of the action, it's obligatory, but it's forgiven if you forgot or you didn't know. طيب, so we're not going to go into detail, we already mentioned that yesterday. طيب, he says its fard is to wash the entire body with water. If I want to do ghusl, what's required of me? You have to wash the entire body. The entire body. There is also a way of doing ghusl that is recommended. Right? Some of you may be familiar with that. That is all sunnah. The bare minimum in ghusl is that you wash the entire body. The whole body gets wet. But there's not a part that cannot get wet. Right? And a person has to be careful and be diligent in making sure that every part of his body gets wet. Even the skin on his head. Right? If he has a lot of hair, he has to get his scalp wet as well. And all other parts of the body. طيب, what about the mouth and the nose, the inside? What do you guys think? Yes or no? Who said no? You? No? Inshallah. So what do you guys think? Anyone says no? Yes? He does? Naam, he has to wash his mouth and his nose. Why? We said in wudu he has to. And we mentioned the reasons that the Prophet ﷺ, he never did wudu except that he washed the mouth and nose. And also, we mentioned another type of evidence, which is that in fasting, the mouth and the nose, if you put something in your mouth while fasting, does it break your fast? No. Not necessarily, unless you swallow it. But just it being in your mouth does not break the fast. That shows the mouth is what? Part of the outside. Excellent. So same thing for ghusl. You have to wash the inside of the mouth and the nose because it's considered part of the outside. طيب. And then he says, what does he say? He says its conditions and wajib are the same as wudu. We mentioned conditions with wudu. Right? We said aql wa tamyiz and all these different conditions. They are the same for ghusl. The same conditions. We're not going to repeat them. There's only one condition that is different. There's only one condition that is different that the author, he didn't mention because it's a short poem, which is that istinja. We said istinja is washing or cleaning oneself after using the restroom. For a person to do ghusl, does he have to do istinja first? What do you guys think? Person uses the bathroom. He doesn't wash himself, he goes straight and does ghusl. Is the ghusl valid? No? Ahsant, mashallah. When you're doing ghusl, you're going to clean the whole body. So that's why they do not require istinja for ghusl, because while you do ghusl, you're going to clean everything anyway. So you don't have to clean it beforehand. It's not considered a prerequisite like it was for wudu. Because when you make wudu, you're not going to clean the front and back passage. But in ghusl, you will. So it's an exception, or it's not a condition of ghusl. But he also says the wajib is the same as wudu. We mentioned one wajib in wudu. What is it? The basmalah. Saying bismillah before wudu, we said is wajib. What do we say wajib means? It's obligatory, but if you forgot it or you didn't know, you're forgiven. So for example, a person does wudu, he doesn't say bismillah. He forgot. After he finishes wudu, he remembers, I didn't say bismillah. The wudu is valid because it's wajib. And we mentioned all the other madhahib say it's sunnah. But like we said, just because something is sunnah, does that mean, we should leave it? No, it's sunnah, do it anyway. Right? And the fact that there's a madhab that's saying it's wajib, that should push us even more to say it and not leave it off. So that means before you do ghusl, you have to say Bismillah. You have to. If you forgot, there's no problem. Question?
I was going to say, sometimes you hear that you shouldn't mention the name of Allah in the restroom. So there's to make ghusl and you just whisper Bismillah in the shower?
So we mentioned this yesterday. When making wudu, if a person's in the bathroom, does he say Bismillah? So the scholars, they have different opinions, but the one that I learned from my teachers, in our madhab, saying Bismillah is wajib. It is required. While mentioning the name of Allah in the bathroom is what? It's not haram. It's disliked. It's disliked. So now you have something that's obligatory and something that is disliked at the same time. Which one do you give precedence to? The thing that is obligatory. So they mention here, and we have a qa'idah, we have a rule that al-karaha tazulu bil-haja. If something is disliked, if there is a need for it, it being disliked goes away. So here there's a need for it, so it wouldn't be considered disliked. Allahu a'lam. طيب, ghusl requires intention, yes or no? It requires intention. For example, a lot of people, they take a shower and they wash the whole body, and then like, oh, I did ghusl. And they think they did ghusl. Did they do ghusl? No, they have to have the intention beforehand. طيب, so what are the intentions when a person does ghusl? And then another question, does doing ghusl give you wudu? It's like the most common question. When I do a ghusl, do I actually have to do the wudu in the ghusl, or just me doing ghusl, does it count as wudu? There's some detail. Type number one, what does he intend? It goes back to the intention. The answer to that question goes back to the intention you made when you did ghusl. Type number one, if you're doing ghusl, it's either going to be for something obligatory or for something sunnah. What do I mean? A person, he just had intercourse and now he's going to do ghusl. Is it obligatory on him or sunnah? Obligatory. What if it's the day of Jum'ah and a person wants to do ghusl? Sunnah. So it shows that you can do ghusl for something that is sunnah or obligatory. If you're doing a ghusl that is sunnah, it does not give you wudu, ever. It cannot give you wudu. Unless you actually did the wudu in the ghusl. Right? But if you just washing your entire body for the sunnah ghusl, it never gives you wudu. The only time it could give you wudu is if it's for something that is wajib, obligatory. طيب? But even then, not necessarily. We're going to mention when it would and when it wouldn't. So we said it goes back to intention. So now we're talking about the ghusl for something that is obligatory. Okay? For the sunnah, we said it's not going to give you wudu. So when you're doing ghusl for something obligatory, what are the possible intentions? Number one, right now you're in a state of major and minor impurity. Because we said anything that requires you to do ghusl also requires you to do wudu. It breaks your wudu. You cannot have wudu without ghusl. Right? A person, he cannot say, oh, I'm in a state of major impurity, but I have wudu. That's not how it goes. So if he has to do ghusl, he's also in a state of minor impurity. So number one, he intends to lift the major impurity and minor. When he's making the ghusl, before the ghusl, he says, I intend, he doesn't have to say it, but his intention is in the heart. He intends that he lifts the major impurity and also the minor. Meaning he's intending to do this ghusl and wudu. If he intended wudu when he did the ghusl, it will give him wudu. طيب, what if he just intends to do ghusl? He doesn't intend to do wudu. He doesn't intend to lift the minor impurity. Then he only gets what he intended for. وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَى. He's only going to get what he intended for. طيب, so if he only intended ghusl, he will not get wudu. So if you want wudu while doing ghusl, you have to bring the intention. طيب, what if he intends an act that requires ghusl? مثلا, what's something that requires ghusl? We said reading Quran from memory, not touching the mushaf. Touching the mushaf requires wudu. But just reading the Quran from memory, it requires what? Only ghusl. So let's say a person says, I want to make ghusl because I want to read the Quran from memory. He's in a state of major impurity. He wants to read Quran, so he makes ghusl for that reason. طيب. When he finishes the ghusl, does he have wudu or no? No. Because the thing he made intention for was something that only required ghusl. طيب, what if he says, I want to make ghusl? He's in a state of major impurity and he says, I want to make ghusl so I can touch the mushaf. I can touch the Quran. That's why he's doing ghusl. Did he get wudu or no? Yes. Because the thing he's doing it for requires wudu. So a person in any case, whenever he does ghusl, he should intend to lift the major and minor impurity. طيب. And there's some details we didn't mention, but it's okay. So the main question that's on everyone's mind, does doing a shower give you wudu? Huh? Unless it's a ghusl where you're intending to lift major impurity. But just doing a shower wouldn't give you wudu. What if a person is doing the sunnah ghusl, but while he's doing the ghusl, he does the actual steps of wudu in the shower? It's valid, there's no problem with that. The question?
Yeah, I was going to say, you probably went over yesterday.
No problem, no problem.
But when making wudu, is the order of what you do part of the wudu making it valid?
Is the order? Yes, you have to follow the order. So
how does that, if you just pour a bucket of water over your head,
yeah.
you make ghusl, but you haven't fulfilled the condition of wudu, so how does that work?
Allahu A'lam, I don't know. I have to go back and check. No. No. طيب, alhamdulillah, we finished Bab al-Tahara. We finished the Bab of purification. What's after the Bab of purification? As-Salah. Question? Using shampoo during ghusl. The chemical mixing with the water would make the water tahir. But usually, it's not like you're pouring shampoo on yourself the whole time. Just water itself will also get on you. So you use shampoo first, or you use body wash, whatever, and then you use water. No. But if a person, the only water he washed himself with was water with shampoo, that would not lift the ghusl. It would not lift, or for a body wash, it would not lift the ghusl. It would not give him ghusl. Yeah, if he rinses it, khalas, then yeah, that's different. But if he didn't rinse it, no one's going to do that, but if he didn't rinse it, yes, it wouldn't give him a ghusl. طيب, any other questions with tahara? Huh?
So I had this question back from when you said, you mentioned an example of someone sleeping in the masjid, and he has a wet dream.
Yeah.
He can just make wudu. But you said that, what's it called? Like just semen itself is tahir. So, and even if it gets on his clothes, he doesn't need to make wudu, right? Or no, he doesn't need to make ghusl, right? Is that what you said?
لا. It being tahir does not mean that if it comes out, you don't have to do ghusl. If it comes out, even though it's tahir, you still have to do ghusl. But we're talking about what's the benefit of knowing it's tahir? If it gets on your clothes, for example, you don't have to wash it. You can still pray in it. Because it's going to come later that if there's najas, that's something that's impure on your clothes, you cannot pray in it. But in this case, if it got on your clothes, you can pray in it. What was that? I didn't hear you. Yeah. So you have to do ghusl. Naam. We mentioned. Aywa, go ahead. Naam. Doing the wudu, it makes the impurity lighter, so it allows you to stay in the masjid. It's like an exception. It makes you allowed to stay in the masjid. But that doesn't mean you can pray now. You cannot pray with that wudu. It's just for you staying in the masjid. That wudu is just for letting you stay in the masjid. Afterwards, you do ghusl if you want to pray and you want to do things. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Does it count as with desire?
We said if you're not conscious, the condition of desire goes away. So if you're asleep and a person has a wet dream, even if he doesn't remember or there's no desire, he still has to. Naam. طيب, let's start with as-salah. He says, فصل الصلاة شرطها قل طهر من حدث ونجس وستر دخول وقت النية والقبلة تفصيلها تطلبه محلة. طيب, he mentions as-salah and he mentions the conditions of as-salah. Number one, what is salah? Prayer. MashaAllah, good. Salah is prayer. But as we mentioned, everything has two definitions, a linguistic one and a technical one. So linguistically, as-salah is a dua. It is dua. طيب? But technically, when we say as-salah, we mean أفعال وأقوال مخصوصة مفتتحة بالتكبير ومختتمة بالتسليم. He says specific actions and statements that begin with a takbir and end with taslim. Now, if you think about what is salah, salah is saying Allahu Akbar, and then you have these statements and actions in between, and then you give salam. That's how they define as-salah. طيب. Before we get into the conditions, a person should know that salah is obligatory on every single Muslim that is mukallaf. Mukallaf, what does that mean? Mukallaf is a word that means legally responsible. At what age does a person become, or at what point does a person become legally responsible? What are the conditions for a person that his actions are being weighed in puberty? Is that it? Any person who at puberty, he's now legally responsible in the Sharia? 15 would be puberty. There's an aql. There are two conditions. You need to be sane and you need to have hit puberty. If a person hit puberty but he's not sane, he's not going to be asked upon anything that he did. He's not required to do anything. If a person is sane but he didn't hit puberty, he's a little kid, he's not legally responsible in the Sharia. Meaning if he does sins, if he doesn't pray, if he doesn't fast, there's no sin upon him. طيب. But the Prophet ﷺ, he said, once he is 7, it is obligatory upon his guardian to teach him how to pray. Or he should encourage him to pray and make him pray when he reaches the age of 7. And so that would mean that his guardian has to teach him how to pray and also how to make wudu. Because you cannot pray without wudu. And this amr, this command in the madhab, ala al-wujub, it's a wajib. It's a wajib for the guardians to have their kids when they're 7 pray. Some people, they're lax on this, and when their kid is 20 years old, they wonder why my son doesn't pray or my daughter doesn't pray. Because the Prophet ﷺ taught us how to get your children to pray. From the age of 7 it starts. When something starts that young, even later on when you grow up, no matter how difficult, no matter how unreligious a person is, he's not going to leave off prayer because he's been doing it since he's 7. SubhanAllah, in Saudi Arabia, you will notice that even the worst of the worst people, the one thing they never leave off is salah. In Saudi Arabia, a person may have just done zina, but he will go after and pray. Why? Because they have a culture of praying. It's a very big thing that is encouraged there. So this is something that is good. Right? No matter how many sins a person has done or how far he feels, he should never leave off the prayer. And the Prophet ﷺ, he said that when a person is 10, when the child is 10, his father should, or his guardian should discipline him. But they mentioned that obviously he should not hurt him. There should not be pain. They say غير مبرح, it should not cause pain. Naam. And most likely, if a child from 7 to 10, he's being encouraged to pray, and he's being encouraged to pray, after that it's going to be much easier, as we mentioned. طيب. Another thing that we should mention with salah is the one who denies its obligation. Someone says salah is not wajib. What's the ruling on him? He's a kafir. He's a disbeliever. Why is he kafir? How is he kafir? Doesn't he believe La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah? How is he kafir? Okay. Good. Also, no, so that would be different. Here we're talking about he denies the obligation. He denies the obligation. It's because he's denying the Quran. The Quran is clear in that praying is an obligation. We have a rule that anything that is known by necessity in the religion, there are some things that every Muslim knows. Every Muslim knows that khamr, alcohol is haram. Every Muslim knows that zina is haram. Every Muslim knows that praying is wajib. Anyone who denies these things that are known by darura, by necessity, it is not possible except that you know this. If you're a Muslim, there's no way that you don't know this. Whoever denies one of these things, he is a kafir. Because he's denying something that is known by necessity. طيب, that's denying the obligation. And by the way, that's for any obligation, not just prayer. If the person denies the obligation of zakah, he says zakah is not obligatory, that also makes him a disbeliever. طيب. It's not denying anything, by the way. It's denying things that are known by necessity. That's a key point. There's some things, as we mentioned, it's not possible except that you know it.
Was there like a companion at one time who basically made an ijtihad to say that like khamr is allowed to drink? There's a verse that you can eat and drink whatever. It's about the iman or something like that.
I'm not sure about that, but khamr, it was actually allowed in the beginning of Islam. Khamr is one of those things that it was prohibited in steps, right? So it didn't just, initially it was allowed. And then it became disliked. And then you were not allowed to drink while going to prayer or the place of prayer. But it was still allowed outside, right? And then the total prohibition came where it was not allowed at all. So this is from the hikmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He revealed it like this. And Aisha radiallahu anha, she said, if the first thing that came down to us was the prohibition of alcohol, we would not be able to handle it. Because this is something, imagine, they've been doing for so long and they're so used to. If that's the first thing that came into them, that was commanded upon them, they would not be able to handle that. And we can extract the benefit from this, is that when dealing with converts or a person who just becomes a Muslim, you cannot expect them day one to just have the iman of Abu Bakr. No, it takes steps. It takes time. طيب. What about the one who doesn't pray? He accepts as an obligation. He says, yes, prayer is fard, there's no doubt. But he himself doesn't pray. What do you guys think? He doesn't pray. He never prays out of laziness. A person who prays sometimes and doesn't pray sometimes, we're not talking about him. But a person who never prays because laziness, he doesn't want to, it's not important to him, but he still says it's fard. I know it's fard, but I just never pray. What do you guys think? Someone's saying disbelief. طيب. The majority of the scholars of Islam وحكي الإجماع في هذا, and some of them said there's ijma'. But just because they said it's ijma' doesn't actually mean there's ijma'. Sometimes ijma' means consensus, when all the scholars of Islam agree. So sometimes a scholar will say, oh, there's consensus, but in reality, there's not consensus, because he didn't know that so-and-so scholar actually disagreed with him. But some of them mentioned that there's ijma', but in reality, there's not ijma'. They said, but majority of scholars agree that what? The one who never prays is not a kafir. He's a Muslim. The majority of scholars. And actually the three madhahib, other than the Hanabila, say this. The Shafi'iyya and the Maliki and Hanafiya, they say he's not a kafir. The strictest of all the madhahib is the Hanabila, the Ḥanbalīs. But even they have conditions. They have conditions. What are the conditions? They have two conditions. They say, number one, a legal authority must call him to pray, like a judge. A judge or the leader of the Muslims has to call him to pray. And then he's given time to pray. He's given 2 prayers. I'll explain what that means. For example, the judge calls him to pray dhuhr. You give him until the end of Asr. You don't give him until Asr. Why don't you give him until Asr? Because dhuhr time is from dhuhr to Asr. They say because maybe he has an excuse to combine. So we'll give him until Maghrib. But after that, there's no excuse. So if he does not pray even after that, the judge calls him and tells him, you have until Maghrib to pray dhuhr. If he does not pray, then he's declared kafir. But before that, he's not. We live in a country where there's no ruler who's going to command him. What does that mean? That means you cannot do takfir of someone who does not pray. You cannot do takfir of someone who does not pray. This is something that people take lightly. Takfir is not something like saying someone is not a Muslim is something very heavy. Why is it heavy? What happened? There are rulings that happen when a person becomes a kafir. Number one, a man, if he's married to a Muslim woman, he's divorced from her. A Muslim woman cannot marry a kafir man. So if you're saying is kafir, they're going to be divorced. Number one, when a Muslim dies, a kafir dies, he's not buried with the Muslims, he's not washed, right? He's not prayed over. So if you're saying this person is a kafir, all of these things are not going to happen to him. So you cannot, it's not something light. This is something that, as we mentioned, there are the 2 conditions. Number one, it has to be from a judge or a ruler, and he has to be given 2 prayers to pray. And what Muslim in his sane mind, after being called from a ruler and given 2 prayers, is not going to pray, right? Almost no one would do that. And by the way, this is not to undermine the importance of prayer. This is not to say, oh, not praying is not. No, missing a prayer is one of the biggest sins. There's no doubt. But this is to show the severity of saying someone is a kafir. So we need to be wary of that. So if we know someone who does not ever pray, do not say he's a kafir. Do not say he's a kafir. And even some of the Ḥanbalīs themselves, because as you know, there are sometimes in one madhab you find different opinions. So even the Ḥanbalīs themselves, some of them disagreed with this. They said, no, nowhere in the history of Islam have we treated the person who never prays as a kafir. They mentioned this. طيب. Now let's get into the conditions of as-salah. The author, he mentioned some conditions. Number one, he said, tahara, purity, having tahara. And the whole last chapter, all we talked about was tahara. So we don't have to mention anything. We mentioned that having wudu is a condition of prayer. You cannot pray without wudu. Number two, he says staying away from najasa. Najasa are things that are impure in the sharia. It's not something that you view as impure or you view as disgusting. Rather, it's things that the sharia has declared to be impure. We mentioned examples. For example, wine is declared to be impure. Urine. What else? A lot of blood. Right. Good. So these things are considered to be impure. So if impurity, you have to stay away from impurity while you're praying. What does that mean, staying away from impurity? Staying away from impurity is in three things. It is in your body, with your clothes, and the place you are praying. What does that mean? That means on your body you cannot have najasa. For example, a person cannot have urine on his body while he's praying. Even if you wiped it, no, you have to wash it off. We didn't talk about it, but actually we did a little bit. To wash najasa, physical impurity, you have to wash it. We said how many times? According to the madhab, 7 times. But other scholars, they said as long as you wash it off, it's no problem. But the madhab is 7 times. In any case, if a person has najasa on him like urine, even if it dried, he has to wash that off before he can pray. Or he has it on his shoes, and he's wearing the shoes and he's praying. He has to take them off. The second one is on his clothes. Right? If he did not wash his clothes before praying, he cannot pray in those clothes. And the third one is the place he's praying. What does that mean, the place he's praying? Does that mean he's in a room and there's like najasa on the wall or on his side or behind him? He can't pray in that room? What does it mean? Yes, wherever his limbs are going to touch. For example, when you make sujood and your limbs touch the ground, you cannot be touching najasa. Even though there can be a najasa right next to you, it's fine. You cannot be touching them. And you can also not be standing on it. طيب. And we mentioned that a small amount of najasa is forgiven. For example, a small amount of blood. It is forgiven. Person bleeds, he has some blood on him, dry blood, it's fine. There's no problem. Right? طيب. This third condition he mentions is covering the awrah. Covering the awrah. Covering the awrah, it means, what is the awrah? We're going to talk about it. Before we talk about what the awrah is, we have to talk about the condition of the awrah. The awrah has a condition, which is that it cannot reveal the skin color. It cannot reveal the skin color. Meaning, let's say a person is wearing, you guys know those pants that they wear under the thobe, the white pants. Some of them are see-through. You can see the person, not fully see-through, but you can see enough to see skin color through the pants. Can he pray in those pants? No, because it's not considered covering the awrah. طيب. So the clothes that a person is using to cover the awrah cannot show the color of the skin. What is the awrah for a man? It is from the navel to the knees. Does it include the navel, the belly button, the knees? Does it include them? Or no? In the Ḥanbalī madhab, it does not include them. In other madhabs, yes, it includes the navel and the knees. But we should be careful and cover our belly button and knees in any case. Because usually for example, if you're showing your knees while you're standing, when you go into sujood and you go into ruku', they're probably going to show. And this doesn't mean, okay, start praying with shorts. No. The prayer has a hayba and it has an etiquette that you don't have to follow, but you should follow it. Some of the scholars, they used to have specific garments that they only wore for prayer. Because, for example, they give the analogy, imagine a king called you and you're going to see him and visit him. You would wear your best clothes, you would get a nice haircut, right? You would smell good. You go in front of the king, you want to look your best. Like we're going to the king of the kings, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we're standing in front of him, and we come with shorts and we come with Allah al-Musta'an. If a person, and subhanAllah, the clothes that he wears in prayer actually affects his khushu'. He notices that when he's wearing his best clothes and he smells good, it helps him focus on the salah. طيب, it's from the navel to the knees. That is outside of prayer. In the prayer, there adds something for the man. He has to cover one of his shoulders. He has to cover one of his shoulders, not both, one of them. For example, a man is wearing shorts that cover from his belly button to the knees, okay? But he has no shirt on. Can he pray? No, he has to cover one shoulder. What if he's wearing a tank top and it goes over the shoulder but it doesn't cover it? Can he pray? No, you have to cover the shoulder. You have to cover the shoulder. But they mention an exception to this, which is a sunnah prayer. They say if it's sunnah, you don't have to cover the shoulders.
I was going to ask what level of the improvements to haram, what level of that is not cover the shoulder for prayer?
So the salah is not going to be valid. It's not even going to be accepted if your shoulder is not covering. Does that make sense? And you would, if a person doesn't know, he's not going to be sinful. But if he's purposely praying like this, of course, there's going to be sin associated with that. Na'am. So what about for the woman? The woman in the prayer. We're talking about in the prayer, what does she have to cover? So obviously there's a lot of scholarly discussion on this, but the madhab, we're talking about the madhab, they say that the whole body except her face. That includes the hands, includes the feet. She has to cover her hands and her feet in the prayer. This is the madhab's opinion. Her face does not have to be covered. And some other scholars in the madhab, they said it's allowed to show the hands is fine. Now, here's a good question, a good mas'ala. What if the awrah gets exposed while praying? Right? A person is praying and part of his awrah reveals. What do we say? How much of it was revealed? طيب. If you cover it as soon as possible, your prayer is valid.
If you have knowledge that your awrah is out, then it's invalid. But if you don't know, then obviously you don't know.
MashaAllah. طيب. If you intentionally uncover your awrah, even if it's a little bit, your salah is invalid because you intentionally uncovered it, right? What if accidentally? Usually it happens accidentally, okay? If it's unintentional, there are two conditions that have to be met for the salah to be invalid. What are they? Number one, it has to be a lot in the time and a lot in the amount. It has to be considered a lot in two things. In the timing and the amount. Meaning, if a lot of the awrah is uncovered for a long time, that's when it would break the salah. So if just one of the conditions is there, it doesn't break. For example, a lot of the awrah reveals, but for a short amount of time. For example, let's say the wind comes and lifts a person's, he's wearing shorts and his shorts, all his thighs show. But he quickly covers it. The salah is valid because it's for a short amount of time. But what if, okay, let's do the other side, which is a small amount of the awrah shows, but for the whole salah, right? Let's say part of the thigh, a little bit of the thigh is showing for the whole prayer. What do you guys think? It's valid. It's valid. We said for it to be invalid, you have to have both. It has to be a lot in the time and a lot in the amount. Okay? And again, this goes back to custom. Whatever a person would consider to be a lot, that's what it would go back to. And also with the timing. Okay? If a person, let's say, what's an example where, let's say, he has something covering his shoulders and it's windy and the wind blows it off. So for the rest of the prayer, one of his shoulders is uncovered, and for the whole prayer he's praying like that. If we consider that to be a lot, then it would be invalid. طيب. The fourth condition he mentions is the entering of the time of salah. You cannot pray before the time enters. If you pray before the time enters, the salah is not valid. طيب. There's details to this, but for the sake of time, we'll leave off some details. Very quick, I think this is important because it's relating to the prayer. I'll mention it. in the madhab, some prayers have 2 times. Okay, we have 5 prayers. 3 of the prayers, the last time you can pray the prayer is when the next prayer begins. Afwan, 2 of the prayers. Fajr, we know, is from when the sun rises until, it's from Tulu' al-Fajr, when the white light shows until the sun rises. That's when it ends. So I have no problem with that. When's the last time you can pray Fajr? Can you pray Fajr right before the sun rises? 10 minutes before? Yes, there's no problem with that. It's allowed. There are some prayers where you cannot pray right before the next prayer. We're going to mention that. Like for Dhuhr and Maghrib, these 2 prayers, you have all the way from Dhuhr until Asr. And for Maghrib, you have all the way from Maghrib until Isha. You have all the way until the next prayer. The time of Dhuhr ends when Asr comes in. And the time of Maghrib finishes when Isha comes in. We have 2 prayers left. Asr and the Isha. When does the time of Asr finish and when does the time of Isha finish? The time of Asr does not finish at the time. We mentioned these 2 prayers have 2 times. So technically, the time of Asr finishes when Maghrib comes in. But that doesn't mean you have to pray before that. I'll explain. We have something called waqt ikhtiyar and waqt darura. Asr has 2 times. The first time is called ikhtiyar. This is when a person has to pray. If he prays past this time, he's sinful. Okay? For Asr, they mention it is when the shade of a person is 2 times his length. So Asr, it comes in when the shade of an object is 1 times the same length as the object. For example, a person is standing and he has a shadow or a shade. When the length of that shade is equal to his height, that's when Dhuhr ends and Asr came in. They mentioned the last time where you can pray Asr before you are sinful is when your shade or the shade of an object is double its length, which is before Maghrib, by the way. It's not at the time of Maghrib. This, Allahu A'lam, might be like an hour before Maghrib, right? It's not at the time of Maghrib. So that means around 1 hour before Maghrib, 45 minutes, Allahu A'lam, I don't know the exact time, but it's around this. You cannot pray Asr. Meaning if you do pray Asr after that time, you are sinful. So a person, he should not delay Asr. Especially like we're very close to Maghrib. And Asr, the time is long anyway. So he should not delay Asr up to like 1 hour before Maghrib. That time from the last hour or from the time when a person's shade is twice its length until sunset. This time is called waqt darura. What is this time? This time they mention is allowed for a person who has a necessity. He has a necessity, a dire necessity. He couldn't pray before. He's allowed to pray in this time. He's not sinful. And it would still consider be on time. For example, they mention a woman who was menstruating and she finished her cycle at this time. Her praying at this time, it would not be considered qadha. Right? She would still have to pray. Naam. But delaying, the main point is that a person, if he delays Asr past the point where his shade is twice his length, which we said is about maybe an hour before Maghrib, he will get sin for it. He will get sin for that. Tayyib. What about Isha? Isha also has 2 times. Isha, the first time of Isha is until when? Halfway through the night. Tayyib. Number 1, basically, we should mention that what is the night? The night is from Maghrib to Fajr. Sometimes they'll say the middle of the night. When we're saying middle of the night, we don't mean 12 a.m. We mean if you took from the time of Maghrib until the time of Fajr, the middle of that. For example, let's say Maghrib was at 8 o'clock and Fajr was at 2 a.m. Right? That would be how many hours is the night? 6 hours. So midnight would be at what time? 11. The time of Isha, if you delay Isha past this point, you're sinful, is the first third of the night. The first third of the night. It's not the middle of the night. There's a second opinion that says it's the middle of the night. But in any case, be safe. Do not delay it past the first third. Okay? If there is a case where it's very difficult and you pray half the middle of the night, inshallah, that's fine. But after that is when we're getting into like a gray area. Do not delay Isha past half the night. And some scholars just said all the way until Fajr. But the madhab, the official opinion of the madhab, when we say official opinion, the majority of the scholars of the madhab, they said it's the first third of the night. After that point, it's still considered Isha. Like if you prayed, for example, a person prays 1 hour before Fajr. It's still considered in the time of Isha. It's not considered Qada. We have something called Qada where you're making up the prayer. It's not considered that you're making up the prayer, but you do get sin for delaying the prayer unnecessarily. The Salah is the haqq of Allah. It never goes away. So a person, even if he prays late, you pray late is 1,000,000,000,000,000 times better than not praying at all. You have to pray even if it's late. But right now we're talking about at what point does it become sinful for delaying the prayer.
To say like your parents, you know, like you weren't like praying from when you were little.
Mm.
Okay. Because I thought of this question before. Would you then have to remake? You said some scholars say that like it's just not.
So number one, it's not when are you held accountable in Islam? The moment you hit puberty. Anything before that, you don't have to make up. So from the time a person hits puberty, when prayer is obligatory upon him, any prayers that he has missed, majority of scholars says he has to make those up. Right? But there's some scholars said that if it's a lot, where it's very difficult on him, and he's done tawbah, that he's forgiven. But in any case, it's not something you want to take lightly. You want to make them up if you can.
How do you go about making them up? Are you doing in order?
Some of them mention that, for example, let's say for every day you pray another prayer after it. For example, you pray dhuhr for today, and right after you pray the dhuhr for one of the dhuhrs that you missed. For example, you estimate, if you believe like maybe 5 years I haven't been praying, round it up a little bit to be safe, okay? So whatever, 5 years, that means for 5 years, you're going to pray every day 2 times. You're going to pray one for that prayer of that day. Then afterwards, you're going to make up the one that you missed. So if you do that for 5 years, that would make up the prayers that you missed. And they mentioned that these prayers, finish them quickly. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult on you. You know, don't take your time in these prayers. Not that you're going to rush and you're going to do the bare minimum. But don't make it easy on yourself, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult.
So the order does matter. It's like if I were to pray my makeup prayers, like I did like Fajr like 5 times.
I don't know. But this is what I remember. They mentioned this. This is one of the ways. I don't know if it's the only way. You had a question?
Yeah, so you were saying that you should pray Isha in the third of the night. I've heard that it becomes a third if you go from Isha until Fajr, but it becomes half if you do Maghrib until Fajr, and it's around the same time. Is that true, or do you know something different?
In the madhab, no. In our madhab, when they say first third of the night, the Ḥanbalī madhab, the scholars, they mention first third of the night is from Maghrib to Isha. From Maghrib to Fajr. That's the night. It wouldn't be if you started from Isha in the first third. Not like that. If there's other scholars, I'm not sure. Like, last question, because we have a lot to cover. No, it's not qada. It's not qada, but you're sinful. It's not qada, but you're sinful. طيب, let's continue because time is short. طيب. The next one he mentions is intention. And we said about intention that it is a condition for all acts of worship. Most of them. We can say like 98%. There's some exceptions, we're not going to mention them. And we said intention has its own conditions. What are they? Al-aql, tamyiz, wal Islam. You need these 3 conditions to have intention. So they're not actually, these 3, Islam, tamyiz, and aql, they're not actually conditions of prayer, they're conditions of niyyah. But obviously for niyyah you need them, so in that sense they are conditions of prayer. طيب, the intention with prayer. When do you do the intention for prayer? And number one, we said intention is not something difficult. It's not like you have to sit there for 10 minutes and you have to be thinking, I'm about to pray dhuhr, I'm about to pray. No. Just the fact that for example, they say just the fact that person went to the masjid shows he had intention to pray. So that alone is enough. But they mentioned that you have to have the intention right before you pray. For example, right before you say Allahu Akbar, you realize, you know what prayer you're about to pray. Right? Or they say a little bit before. Even at the moment when he said Allahu Akbar, he wasn't remembering that I'm about to pray dhuhr. But a little bit before that, as long as you had the intention, the prayer is valid. But when you do the intention, you have to specify the salah. You have to specify the salah. So for example, a person, he goes to the masjid, or he's about to pray at home, for example, and he has no idea what he's about to pray. He just says, Allahu Akbar. And he's just praying. And he's like, yo, am I praying Dhuhr or Asr? And before he prayed, he didn't have the intention. This is kind of hard to imagine. Like you would think if someone's praying, he's praying for a prayer. But if that does happen, then that would not be valid. But most of the times, people know what prayer they're praying. I'll give you an example. I'll give you a good example. A person, he thinks that he didn't pray Dhuhr, right? He forgot he didn't pray Dhuhr and he's about to pray Asr. So he intends Asr. But then he didn't pray Dhuhr. So now there's a problem. So that intention for Asr would not work for Dhuhr. So no, that Salah would not be valid. If he remembers during the prayer. La, yes, yeah. And then he's going to pray it. So as we mentioned, the intention is not something sa'b. It's not something difficult. For example, we're about to pray Maghrib in a little bit. The fact that we're all here, we know it's Maghrib time. You don't actually have to think, I'm about to pray Maghrib prayer. You don't really need to do that. Just the fact that you're going to pray and you made wudu and you're standing in line, most likely you have the intention. The intention is not something difficult. Naam. The last condition is facing the Qibla. Facing the Qibla is a condition. And they mention if you are close to the Kaaba, you have to تصيب عين الكعبة. You have to face directly to the Kaaba if you are close to the Kaaba. If you are far, as long as you're in the direction. If you are far, as long as you're in the direction of the Kaaba, you don't have to be. So obviously a person is 5,000 miles away. How is he going to, if you drew a straight line from him to the Kaaba, he's not going to get to the Kaaba. But he'll get the general area, which is enough. But if he's close to the Kaaba, meaning he can see it, if he's in the Haram, for example, if he's a little off the Kaaba, the Salah is not valid. He has to be directly to the Kaaba. And they have lines there, so it's easy. Usually a person is not going to miss it. But if a person is far for us, as long as you are in the general direction, for example, let's say the Qibla is straight, right? A person is praying this way or this way. There's no problem. As long as he's in the general direction. It starts getting problematic when you're going the opposite way, right? So if you're off by a small amount, there's no problem. Now he's going to talk about the pillars of Salah. We mentioned conditions, we mentioned obligations, we mentioned wajib, we never mentioned pillars. What is a pillar? A pillar is a rukn. It's called arkan or rukn. It's the same thing as fard, same thing. So same ruling. It's an obligation, meaning if you don't do the rukn, what happens to the Salah? It's not valid. You have to come with the rukn. These are pillars, you have to come with them. Okay? He says the first rukn, the first thing you have to do in the prayer, أركانها تبدأ بالقيام وبعد تكبيرة الإحرام. He says the first one, and by the way, there are 14 pillars of prayer. Depending on how you divide it, 13, 14. But what's known is that there are 14 pillars. And a pillar, we said it's a prayer. The pillar, the rukn is a pillar of prayer. And the prayer is not valid without it. If you did not come with the pillar, the prayer is not valid. And it does not drop by forgetting or ignorance. For example, ruku' is a pillar. Okay? Let's say one of the rak'ahs, a person didn't do ruku'. Then after the salah, he remembers, I did everything except the ruku'. I forgot though. Is the prayer accepted? No. Because it is not forgiven through forgetfulness or ignorance. It's not forgiven. It has to be there in any case. طيب. How's the time looking? 7 o'clock. Maghrib is 8:30. طيب. Bismillah. We're going to try to go quick. We might go past Maghrib. طيب. And then we have things in the prayer that are wajib. So we said rukn is the same thing as fard. When we're talking about ghusl, for ghusl and for wudu, when we're talking about fard, rukn is the same thing. We can call it rukn or fard. طيب, then we have wajib. What do we say about wajib? The same thing in wudu. In ghusl, it's here. If it's an obligation, but if you forgot it or you were ignorant, you are excused. You're forgiven. So the salah also has wajibat, things that are wajib. So these are things that must be done. Obviously, if you leave it on purpose, the salah is not valid. But if you forget it, it's not invalid, but you have to do something. What do? Sujood al-sahw. Sujood al-sahw. Huh? And then we have something called sunnah. Sunnah, these are things that obviously you get reward to do, but if you don't do it, if you intentionally leave off a sunnah, what happens? You get sin? Not necessarily. The salah is still valid. Salah is valid. طيب, the first pillar he mentions is standing. He says, أركانها بتبدأ بالقيام. طيب, he says standing. Is this like all the time standing? No. Standing in the fard prayer. للقادر, for the person who is able. There's two conditions. It has to be a fard, it has to be for someone who is able. Meaning what? In a sunnah prayer, let's say there's a person, he's capable, fully capable of standing, but he wants to sit. What do you guys think? Valid or not valid? Huh? It's valid. But he gets half the reward. Half the reward. طيب, what if it's a fard prayer, but he cannot stand? Does he have to stand? Obviously not. If he cannot stand, he does not have to stand. So this condition is for the fard prayer and for the person who is capable. طيب. What is considered standing? What is the lowest amount that is considered standing? Who knows? It is anything above ruku'. Ruku', at a certain point it becomes considered ruku', and at a certain point it becomes standing. So that point, anything above ruku' is going to be considered standing. What is the point of ruku'? We're going to talk about it. طيب. But the point is that anything above ruku' is going to be considered that you're standing. So even if he's leaning over a little bit, is it fine? It's fine. There's no problem with it. As long as he hasn't reached the point of ruku'. طيب. And by the way, this condition of standing, a lot of people are very lenient on it. For example, a person, he might not be able to do ruku', but he can stand. So you'll see people, the whole prayer, they're going to be on the chair. But they're able to stand, he's just not able to do ruku'. He has to stand. At any point where he can stand, he has to stand. Right? So it's not like, oh, I can't do sujood or I can't do ruku', so I can stand. I can sit on the chair. No, you have to stand for when you're able to stand. نعم. طيب. The second one he says is Takbiratul Ihram. What is Takbiratul Ihram? The takbirah is when you say Allahu Akbar. Takbirah is saying Allahu Akbar, but this is Takbiratul Ihram. It means the takbir when you're starting the prayer. When you are starting the prayer. Specifically that first takbir. It is a rukun, a pillar of the prayer. Meaning if you don't do it, your salah is not valid. It didn't even start. Like what if a person says Allahu Akbar, but he doesn't raise his hands? He just says Allahu Akbar. Is it valid or no? Jad. صحيح ولا لا؟ إن شاء الله. رفع اليدين. When we're saying takbirah here, we're talking about the verbal utterance of Allahu Akbar. We're not talking about actually raising your hands. The raising your hands is sunnah. If a person says Allahu Akbar and just folds his hands, that's sunnah. So here we're talking about the statement Allahu Akbar. And again, when it comes to statements, you have to pronounce it. Like sound has to come out. If there's no sound, you said Allahu Akbar in your head, your salah did not start. Salah did not start. طيب. Then he says, Fatihatun ruku'un i'tidalu, sujudun raf'u ala ma qalu. He says Surah al-Fatihah in bowing, which is ruku', and i'tidal, which is rising from ruku', sujood, which is prostration, and rising from prostration according to what is said. طيب. He mentioned a few pillars here. He mentioned multiple. He said number one, reading al-Fatihah. Reading al-Fatihah is a rukun. If a person does not read Fatiha, what happens? The salah is not valid. طيب. Is this for everyone though? It's not for everyone. طيب. This is for everyone except the one praying behind the imam. So we have three types of people when it comes to salah. Either the imam, he's praying and he has people behind him. Or the ma'moom, he's behind the imam. Or the munfarid, the person praying by himself. These are the only three cases that can be imagined. Person, he's leading people, or he is behind the imam, or he's praying by himself. If a person is the imam or praying by himself, he has to read al-Fatihah. Like the exception is for the one who's praying behind the imam. The one behind the imam's reading of the Fatiha takes care of the person behind him. So because the imam read it, it's not obligatory upon you if you're behind the imam. So for example, if the person behind the imam did not read Fatiha, is this salah valid? is valid. As long as the Imam read Fatiha, and of course he's going to read Fatiha. But it is sunnah for him to read it actually. The person behind the Imam, you should still read the Fatiha. But they mentioned that you should not read while the Imam is reading. You should not read while the Imam is reading, because it's like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَإِذَا قُرِئَ الْقُرْآنُ فَاسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ. If the Quran is being recited, اسْتَمِعُوا لَهُ, listen to the Quran. So this is a command. Imam Ahmed saw that this command was in Salah. So he saw that people in Salah, they should not listen, they should not be reciting while the Imam is reciting. They should listen. But we said it's sunnah for him to read the Quran. It's sunnah to him to read Fatiha, but it's also sunnah to listen to the Imam. So when does he read? It is recommended for the Imam to give time for the people behind him to read al-Fatiha. You might notice that sometimes the Imam, he finishes Fatiha, and then before starting the next surah, he waits like 30 seconds. You're probably thinking, oh, he doesn't know what he's going to read. He's thinking of what he should read. No. Maybe sometimes. But sometimes they know what they're going to read, but he's giving you time to read the Fatiha. Because reading Fatiha for the person behind him is sunnah. But he's not required to. What about if it's a quiet prayer? Some salawat, we pray it's quiet. Does the Imam's recitation still cover for the one behind him? Or the one behind him now has to read it? It covers? There's the difference of opinion. It still covers. Because he still read the Fatiha. Even if you didn't hear it, he still read the Fatiha. So it covers for you. And in that case, if you're praying behind the Imam who's reading quietly, now you don't hear him. So now you can read Fatiha whenever. And as we mentioned, you actually have to move your lips. It's not just enough to, you have to let sound come out to the point you can hear yourself. The fourth one he mentions is al-ruku'. Al-ruku' is bowing. What is the lowest amount where a person is considered to be a ruku'? Does he have to have a straight back, parallel with the ground, 90 degrees? If you put a cup of water on it, it wouldn't spill, it wouldn't move. What's the lowest amount for a ruku'? The lowest amount is once a person gets to the point where he can touch his knees. When a person bends enough for him to be able to touch his knees, that's considered ruku'. So that might be like, if this is straight, it might be at this point. Right? A person doesn't have to go 90 degrees to be able to touch his knees. He can usually touch it before that. That's the lowest point of a ruku'. But obviously the best is when you're parallel with the ground. So we said for qiyam, standing, the minimum for standing would be anything past ruku'. So if you're bowing enough to the point, for example, let's say a person wants to stand, he's in the standing position, but he's bowed enough to the point where he can touch his knees. Even if he is not touching his knees, it's not valid, because that's considered ruku'. You guys got it? So you cannot bend too much to the point where you're considered in the position of ruku'. Then he says i'tidal, which is standing from ruku'. You have to stand from ruku'. That's also a pillar. Then they mention sujood, making sujood, which is prostration. Sujood, there are 7 limbs that touch the ground. 7 limbs. What are they? The 7 limbs? The feet, knees, hands, and the forehead. How is it 7? 2 feet, 2 knees, 2 hands, that's 6. Nose and the forehead, that's 8. The whole face is considered 1 limb. Okay? So the 6 limbs are 2, 2, 2. The feet, the knees, and the hands. That's 6. Now, the face is considered, the forehead and the nose is considered 1 limb. So the obligation is that the 7 limbs have to touch the ground. So does that mean, for example, some people, their nose doesn't touch the ground? What do you guys think about as-salah? By the way, I forgot to mention this. Even if it's part of the limb, the whole limb doesn't have to touch. For example, a person, his whole hand isn't touching. Let's just say his fingertips are touching. Okay? Not his whole hand. That's still valid. His whole hand does not have to touch. So even if part of the limb is touching, he's good. So now, let's say a person is not touching with his nose. His forehead is touching, but his nose is not touching. Is it valid or salah is not valid? Did he do the sujood or no? It's part of the limb, because we said this is 1 limb. The nose and the forehead is 1 limb. So if the nose is not touching, because the forehead is still touching, he's fine. Right? His salah is still valid. Obviously, it's not recommended he should touch both. But the salah is still valid. And likewise, if his forehead was not touching but the nose was touching, it would be valid. Right. They mentioned that if it's something soft, like a cushion, you would have to press into it. Okay? Like the normal ground, if you cannot press into it, that's enough. But if it's something that, like for example, you're praying on a mattress, you would have to push enough to the point where, like as much as you can. Naam. So you cannot be praying on a mattress and not putting any pressure on it if it's super soft. It's not allowed.
But as far as your forehead being on a slightly different plane than the rest of your body, like if you prostrate like on a phone because the ground is there's pebbles on it and you don't have a prayer rug, does that count as your forehead touching the ground?
Allah, I'm not sure. No, you should touch both. But if a person is only touching one of them, it's valid. طيب, the next one is rising from sujood. He has to rise from sujood. Then he says, ثم جلوس بين سجدتين سكونه ثاني التشهدين. طيب. He says, then sitting between the two prostrations, tranquility within it, and the second tashahhud. He mentions three more. He mentions number one, the sitting between the two sajdatain. For example, when you first go into sajda, then you come up and you have a little sitting. The jalsa that is very short, and then you go back to sujood. That sitting is also a pillar. You have to come with it. So basically, you're going to notice most of the pillars are physical actions. Right? The standing, the ruku', standing again, going to sujood, the sitting position. It's all the physical actions. You have to come with every physical action. Right? That physical positions. طيب. Then he says sakina. He says there has to be tranquility. What does that mean? Does that mean when you're in sujood or you're at a state of peace, your heart is at peace? Is that what it means? No. Sukoon, they also call it tuma'nina. Tuma'nina, it means that there is a brief stillness in each position of the prayer. For example, a person, he's standing, then he goes to ruku', very quickly comes up. He didn't stop when he got to ruku'. At every position, you have to stop. There has to be a period of stillness where you're not moving. Even if it's a small amount, even if it's very small, you have to do that. If you don't do that, then salah is not valid. For example, a person just goes and comes up right away. No, you have to stop, then come up, even if it's short. Like, what's the amount? How short can it be? Some of them mention even the smallest amount of stillness. Even the lowest amount you're still, then that's fine. Some of them mentioned the time it takes for you to read the dhikr. For example, if you're in ruku', you have to say Subhana Rabbil Azim. The time it takes for you to say that is the amount they have to say there. طيب? So in any case, the main point, a person doesn't just go down and come up right away. No, he stops and then he goes up. And this is a requirement in every position. When you go to ruku', you have to be still. When you stand up, you have to be still. When you go to sujood, you have to be still. When you come up, you have to, for every position. For example, a person is ruku', he's still. He comes up and he goes down right away. It's fine? No, it's not fine. طيب. Then he says, the second tashahhud. In the salah, what is tashahhud? At-tahiyyatu lillah. Tashahhud is not the sitting. We're talking about the dua. At-tahiyyatu lillahi wa salat. This is the only dhikr, this in Fatiha, that is wajib. Was-salah ala nabi. We're going to get to that. But other than that, all the other adhkar, like the actual sayings, they're all either wajib or sunnah. These are the only two that are actually pillars. Most of the pillars, as we mentioned, are the physical positions. But these two, the Fatiha and also saying At-Tahiyyatu Lillahi, the whole dua, is a rukn, a pillar. الصلوات والطيبات السلام عليك أيها النبي ورحمة الله وبركاته السلام علينا وعلى عباد الله الصالحين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله, the whole dua, وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. نعم. الصلاة Ibrahimiyya, we're going to come to it. طيب. So the tashahhud here is talking about the dua. He's not talking about the sitting. طيب. So the dua is a pillar. And it includes Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. This dua, the shortest amount that he has to say is Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. That is the minimum. If he doesn't say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad, if he doesn't finish the whole dua, he just says Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, is it valid? It's valid. What if he doesn't say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad? It's not valid. You have to say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. This phrase, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad, you have to bring it. واجب. نعم ركن. نعم. لازم تكون دقيق في العبارات. It's not واجب. يعني لغة واجب, yes, but here ركن. Because we said wajib has a different meaning. Not wajib, but some of them said is disliked. But here they just say Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Naam. طيب, he says the second tashahhud. In the salah there's two tashahhud. Right? For example, if you're praying, for example, Dhuhr or Isha, 4 rak'ahs. The first tashahhud would be after 2 rak'ahs, and the last tashahhud would be the last rak'ah. Okay, that first tashahhud is not what we're talking about. That's going to come to us. We're talking about the last one on the last rak'ah. That's where it is a pillar. Like, what if it's Fajr? It's 2 rak'ahs. This would be pillar. Because when he says second tashahhud, it should be the last tashahhud. The last tashahhud. So if there's only one tashahhud, it would be the last one. Then he says, وَالْجَلْسَةُ الْأَخِيرَةُ التَّسْلِيمُ تَرْتِيبُهَا وَفَّقَكَ الْعَلِيمُ. He says the final sitting, the taslim, and doing these pillars in order. May Allah al-Alim give you success. He mentions 3 more pillars. These are the last 3. The last one we said is final tashahhud. Now we're saying the final sitting as well. So both the tashahhud, the actual dua, and the actual sitting, both of them are pillars. You have to do both of them. طيب? So this shows that what? The first tashahhud sitting, the first sitting is not a pillar. After 2 rak'ahs for dhuhr, you sit down. Is that a pillar? No. The last one is a pillar. Like, what is the first one? It's going to come to us. Then he says, at-taslimu. Taslim is saying, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. طيب. Can you say it 1 time or you have to do it 2 times? 2 times. In the madhab, you have to do it 2 times. You have to do both. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. By the way, they mentioned saying salam alaikum without the alif lam. It's not valid. They say you have to assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. This is something that you have to be careful of. A lot of people make a mistake on that. So it's not salam alaikum, it's assalamu alaikum. No. By the way, as we mentioned, for example, maybe you find out, like right now, most of us, maybe we've been saying salamu alaikum without the alif lam. Are all of our prayers invalid? No, that's not what it means. Because we can look for another opinion that allows it. But from now on, we should start saying assalamu alaikum. طيب? So don't think, oh my God, I haven't saying assalamu, all my prayers I have to redo. It's not like that. طيب. The last pillar he mentions is tartib. We said tartib is what? Order. What does that mean? Doing the pillars in order. For example, you do standing first, and then you do ruku, and then you do standing. You come with the order. If a person started with sujood, and then he stood, and then he did ruku, and then he did, it's not going to work. You have to come with the order. Like, those are the pillars of salah. What is a pillar? We said a rukn, but what does it mean? The salah is not valid if it's not there. You have to bring these. There's no sujood al-sahw for the pillar. If you miss the pillar, it's done. You would make up the pillar and then do sujood al-sahw. But the pillar has to be done. Even if you forgot it, you have to make it up. We'll mention the details after. طيب. Then he says, واجبها تكبيرة الانتقال تسميع التحميد ثم التالي. Now he's going to talk about the wajibat. What are wajibat? Things that are obligatory, but if you forgot them, you're forgiven, but you have to do sujood al-sahw. Right? In wudu, if you forgot it, you're forgiven. There's nothing. Here you still have to make up for it in a way. How do you make up for it? By doing sujood al-sahw. What is sujood al-sahw? Sujood al-sahw is at the end of the salah. Right? Before you give taslim, you do 2 sajdas. For example, a person made a mistake in salah, and then he's in the last position. He says at-tahiyyat. He makes all the du'as. Before he gives salam, he goes down to sujood, and he does sujood, and he comes up. And he does sujood again, and then he comes up. 2 sajdas. And then he says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, right away. That's called sujood al-sahw. And sujood al-sahw has its own rules that we're not going to really go into because this is just a short poem. طيب? So now we're going to talk about wajibat. What are the things that are wajib? If you forgot them, you don't have to go back and do it, but you have to do sujood al-sahw. He's going to talk about it. He says the first one is takbiratul intiqal. What is takbiratul intiqal? We said the first one is Takbiratul Ihram, which is the first one when you start the prayer. You say Allahu Akbar. طيب, what about intiqal? Means to transition. You're going from one position to another. You still have to say Allahu Akbar. But it's not a rukn, it's not a pillar, it's a wajib. That means what? If a person forgot, for example, he went to ruku' without saying Allahu Akbar. Does he go back and redo it? No. He doesn't have to go back and redo it because he forgot. Obviously, you intentionally leave it. No, we're not talking about that. We're talking about you forgot, you're forgiven, or you didn't know. But what does he do at the end of the prayer? He does sujood al-sahw, because he forgot an obligation. طيب, so takbiratul intiqal is all the other Allahu Akbars except the first one. So for example, you go from standing to ruku', you go from ruku' to standing, then you go from standing to sujood. All of these are considered wajibat. They are obligatory, but if you forget it, you don't have to make it up. But you have to do sujood al-sahw. By the way, there's 8 wajibat. So this is number 1. طيب, a common mistake is that people, for example, let's say they finish Fatiha, they finish the surah after Fatiha, and they want to go to ruku'. They say Allahu Akbar, and then they go down. Why is this a mistake? This is called Takbiratul Intiqal, the takbirah of transition. It means you have to say it while you are transitioning. You cannot be standing and then say Allahu Akbar and then go down. Okay? Or some people, they go down first and then they say Allahu Akbar. Once they already reach ruku', you cannot do this. You have to say it while you are transitioning. And the official opinion of the madhab is very strict. They say you can only say Allahu Akbar while you're transitioning. The whole time, meaning, for example, let's say you said Allahu Akbar while you're transitioning, then you get to ruku', and you finish the Allahu Akbar while you reach ruku'. They say your salah is batil. If you did it intentionally. طيب, because you didn't ما أتيت بالواجب. You did not come with the wajib. It's as if you intentionally left it off. But some of them said, no, as long as you did part of it while you're transitioning. You don't have to finish the whole takbir while you're transitioning, but as long as you did part of it. But a person, while he's standing, he did Allahu Akbar, and then he goes down. This is not allowed. طيب, so he has to do it while he's transitioning. Naam. We're going to delay questions because we have a lot of information. If there's questions, just write it down and at the end. طيب, the next one he says is tasmi'. What is tasmi'? Saying Sami Allahu liman hamida. طيب, is tasmi' a wajib for everyone? No. Right? Just like we said, there was something else we mentioned, it's not wajib for everyone. Fatiha is not wajib for everyone. Tasmi' as well. Tasmi' is wajib on 2 people. 2 people say it. The person praying by himself and the imam. Just like Fatiha. The person praying by himself and the imam, they say Sami Allahu liman hamida. That rules out who? The one praying behind the imam. If you are praying behind an imam, you do not say Sami Allahu liman hamida while you are rising. For example, the imam is leading, he says Sami Allahu liman hamida. You do not say Sami Allahu liman hamida. You say Rabbana wa lakal hamd. Wa Rabbana lakal hamd. Allahumma Rabbana lakal. There's many phrases you can say, but as long as you say the phrase, you're fine. طيب, when does he say it? طيب, the imam, he's going to say both. He's going to say Sami Allahu liman hamida and Rabbana wa lakal hamd. Okay? As well as the person praying by himself. He will say Sami Allahu liman hamida, Rabbana lakal hamd. The person who is praying behind the imam, he says Rabbana lakal hamd only. We said this. When does he say it? He says it while he's rising. Like if you're praying behind it, so we have 3 cases. All right, follow along. The first one is the person behind the imam. While he's rising, he says Rabbana lakal hamd. Once he's risen, sakit. He's quiet. He doesn't say anything. So if you're praying behind the imam, Rabbana lakal hamd while you're rising. Once you're risen, you don't say anything. Like the imam and the person praying by himself, while they're rising, they say what? Sami Allahu liman hamida. Once he's up, he says Rabbana lakal hamd. You got it? So depending on if you are praying behind the imam, or you're the imam, or praying by yourself, there's a different ruling. We said the one behind the imam, he doesn't say Sami Allahu liman hamida. He only says Rabbana lakal hamd. And one you say is different. You say it while you're rising, not when you stood up. طيب. Then he says tahmeed. Questions, and please, there's a lot to cover. Tahmeed, we says Rabbana lakal hamd. And we said it's wajib on all of them. It's wajib on the imam, it's wajib on the person behind him, it's wajib on the person praying by himself. They all say Rabbana lakal hamd. Meaning if you didn't say Rabbana lakal hamd and you forgot it, you have to do sujood al-sahw. Yeah, these are all wajibat. These are wajibat. Meaning, Sami Allahu liman hamd, if you do not say it, you have to do sujood al-sahw. You guys got it? That's what we're saying when we're saying wajib. All of these things that are wajib, we're saying that if you didn't do it out of forgetfulness, you don't have to repeat it, but you have to do sujood al-sahw. طيب. Next, we have, he says, تسبيحة الركوع والسجود وطلب الغفر من المعبود. He says, the tasbih of bowing in prostration and seeking forgiveness from the one that is worshipped. He mentions 3 here. He mentions the tasbih of ruku' and the tasbih of sujood, and also Rabbi ghfirli, the dua Rabbi ghfirli, when he is in between the 2 sittings. When he's in ruku', he has to say Subhana Rabbiyal A'la, right? No, Subhana Rabbiyal Azim. He says Subhana Rabbiyal Azim. He says it in ruku'. If he does not say Subhana Rabbiyal Azim out of forgetfulness, what does he do? Sujudu sahw. He does not go back to do it. No, he continues the prayer, but he does sujood sahw. And by the way, for all these adhkar, the minimum time is once. You have to say it 1 time at the minimum. And if you say it 3 times, it's better. If you say it 3 times, it's recommended. And you can say it more than that. There's no problem saying it more than 3 times. Same thing, Subhana Rabbi al-A'la. You have to say it in sujood. And then the sitting between sujood, between the 2 sajdatain, the 2 sujoods, you have to say Rabbi ghfirli, Allahumma ghfirli. Any of these suffice. And again, you only have to say it 1 time, the minimum. But like we mentioned, I'll mention again, just because this is the minimum doesn't mean that we suffice with the wajib. We're going to try to do the sunnah. Right? So, okay, now you learn the sunnah is 3 times or is more than once. Now you're going to strive to do that. You're not going to say, oh, it's only sunnah, so I'm just going to do it once. طيب. He says, تشهد أول والجلوس له وغيرها سننها المفضلة. نعم. He says the first tashahhud and it's sitting. And everything other than these are from the sunan. طيب, now he's going to mention, we mentioned there's 8 wajibat, he mentioned 6, there's 2 more. He said the tashahhud, the first tashahhud and it's sitting. We said the second tashahhud what? The second tashahhud and it's sitting. Don't look at your notes. The second tashahhud and it's sitting is what? Rukn, it's a pillar. The first tashahhud and the first sitting are wajib. What does that mean? We're going to see what that looks like. This is probably one of the most common positions that people mess up on, by the way. For example, they're in sujood in the second rak'ah and they forget to sit down, they start standing up. And they're like, oh no. They may remember, they may not remember. What does he do? We're going to talk about it. There are 3 scenarios with the person who forgot this sitting. Okay? The first sitting. Number 1 is the person who while he is rising, he remembers. Okay, mathalan, person is in the second rak'ah and he's sujood, and then he comes up, but he doesn't sit. He forgot it's the second rak'ah, he starts standing. While he's standing, he remembers, oh no, I have to sit down. What does he do? He has to sit down. He has to go down. It's wajib upon him to go down. What if he got all the way up and now he stood up, but he didn't start the Fatihah? He just got up and he's like, oh, I have to go down. He has a choice, but it's disliked for him to go down. It's better for him to continue. And then he would do sujood al-sahw. In any case, he would do sujood al-sahw, even if he went down because he made a mistake. طيب? But in this case, it's better for him to continue with the Fatiha and not go down because he already came up. He said Allahu Akbar while he's transitioning. It's not about the Allahu Akbar or not. It's about while he's rising, we said he has to go down. If he said Allahu Akbar, and he came up, then he has the option. But it's disliked for him to go down. It's better for him to stay where he's at. But if he went down, there's no problem. And if he stays, there's no problem. The third case is a person got up and he started the Fatiha already. Can he go down? No, he cannot. Why? Because now he started a rukn, which is al-Fatihah. He started the rukn, al-Fatihah, and you cannot leave a rukn for a wajib. You may be asking, but standing is a rukn, is as well. So how come when we stood, we had the option? They say because standing is not a rukn that is, how do I translate? Maqsood li dhatihi. It's not the goal in and of itself. The whole point of the standing was for the Fatiha. So the Fatiha was what was intended. So because once you start Fatiha, you cannot go down. But they say standing is not really the main goal, so that when you stand, you're allowed to go down. Allahu a'lam. Naam. He says everything other than this is sunnah. Everything else other than what we mentioned from the wajibat and the arkan are sunnah. Everything else, anything you can think of, sunnah. طيب. And the sunnah, it can be 2 things. It can be fi'liya or qawliya. It can be statements Certain statements are sunnah and also certain actions. What are actions that are sunnah? It's raising the hands. What else? The finger, raising the finger. Right? Stuff like that. Those are all sunnah. What about statements that are sunnah? Repeating the adhkar more than once. Sunnah. Reciting a surah after Fatiha. Excellent. Guys, reciting a surah after Fatiha is a sunnah. Meaning if a person didn't read the surah after Fatiha, his salah is valid. But it's disliked. Do not leave the surah after Fatiha off. But also saying basmalah. Saying the basmalah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, before you start Fatiha is sunnah. طيب. Saying Ameen is sunnah. All these things are sunnah. So if they're left off, they're no sin. But like we mentioned, when we hear something is sunnah, and this is something that Prophet ﷺ did constantly, consistently, we should strive to do it. Naam. What about turning right and left for the taslim? When you say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Sunnah or no? What if a person, he doesn't move his head, he just says Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Sunnah. Moving the head is sunnah. طيب. You still do it. Naam. طيب. Now he's going to talk about things that break the salah. He says, مبطلها ترك لركن مطلقا وترك واجب بعمد حققا وترك شرط وكذا الكلام والفعل إن يكثر كذا السلام أثناءها تعمد الزيادة قهقهة إذا نافت العبادة. He mentioned many things that break the salah. طيب, the first one he says, abandoning a pillar in any case, whether you forgot or you remembered, intentionally or unintentional, leaving a rukun, the salah is invalid. Okay? طيب, there's some tafsil here I think it's important to mention. For example, we said ruku' is a rukun. Okay? A person in his first rak'ah, he doesn't pray ruku', he doesn't do the ruku'. He did everything else except the ruku' and then he stands up. Is the salah invalid? No, that rak'ah would be invalid. طيب. So when would the salah be invalid? The salah would be invalid if you did taslim and then you didn't do a rukun. Also, if you leave a pillar intentionally, right away the salah is invalid. If you leave a pillar intentionally. طيب. Also, if you leave a wajib intentionally, you cannot leave them off intentionally. A wajib and a rukun cannot be left off intentionally. For the wajib, we mentioned it's fine if he forgot. Also, the pillar, if he forgot, there's rulings. If he remembers while I'll mention the rulings. For example, he forgot ruku', okay, in the first rak'ah, and he remembers while he's still in the first rak'ah, what does he do? He has to go back because he's still in the rak'ah. طيب, what if he remembers he didn't do ruku' after he started the second rak'ah? That first rak'ah is invalid. There's no going back. Like, what if he remembers after the prayer? The prayer is not valid. The prayer is not valid. No. طيب. Then he says, وَتَرْكُ شَرْطٍ, and leaving off a condition. We mentioned the conditions. What are they? Niyyah, tahara, which is wudu, facing the qibla, covering the awrah. What else? There's one more. Avoiding najasa, physical impurity, avoiding physical impurity. If a person leaves off one of the conditions, for example, a person prays and he's not facing the qibla, salah is not accepted. If he prays without wudu, salah is not accepted. The time. If he prays before the time, salah is not accepted. What if he prays after the time? Salah accepted? Huh? Prays after the time. It's accepted, but he's sinful, as we mentioned. Right? So you definitely don't want to pray before the salah because it's not going to be accepted. طيب, he says also speech. He says كَذَا الْكَلَامُ. He says also speech. طيب, even if it's unintended. If a person, while he's praying, he says something, even unintentionally, the salah is invalid. Some other scholars have said he has to intend it, but for us, even if it's a little bit, if it's unintended, it breaks the salah. They also say, he's going to mention it after. طيب. He mentions a lot of continuous movements. If a person continuously moving, there's two conditions. It has to be a lot and it has to be continuous. Okay? And again, this goes back to the custom. For example, they say if a person looked at you and it wouldn't even look like you're praying, you're just doing so many actions that it's like you don't even seem like you're praying, that type of action would break your salah. طيب. But a little bit of movement for a maslahah, if there's a need and you have to do some movement. For example, looking around for a need, it's not going to break the prayer. No. He also says كذا السلام أثناءها تعمد الزيادة. نعم. He says intentionally giving salam before you finish. Okay? A person intentionally says Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. In any position, if he says that, the salah is invalid if he intentionally does it. طيب, what if he intentionally gives salam? For example, a person prayed 3 rak'ahs and he intentionally did taslim thinking he finished the salah. There's a whole rak'ah he didn't pray. What do you guys think? Naam. So if a person, he gives salam early, for example, he only prayed 3 rak'ahs out of 4. He thought he prayed all 4. He only prayed 3. He gives salam, and then he remembers, I didn't pray a rak'ah. طيب, he's allowed, there's conditions for him to continue. He can continue the prayer and make that rak'ah up with conditions. Number 1, he could not have done anything that breaks the salah. For example, if he broke his wudu after the salah, for example, a person prayed 3 rak'ahs for Isha, and then he breaks the wudu, and he's sitting there and he's like, oh, I didn't pray 1 rak'ah. You broke the wudu, you cannot make it up. طيب, if a person talks after the salah, he prayed 3 rak'ahs and then he speaks to people, can he make that rak'ah? No, because in the salah, speaking breaks. So anything that breaks your salah, in the salah, anything that breaks the prayer, well, if you did it in the prayer, it would break it outside, in this case. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Allahu A'lam. I don't know, but I'm not aware of this narration. But we mentioned yesterday that in general, we mentioned that whenever, I'll ask you a question. Should a person take, if a madhab goes against his hadith, if his madhab goes against the hadith, should he take the hadith or the madhab? Hadith. طيب. We mentioned this type of question is a wrong question. Why is it a wrong question? Because there is no madhab that just looks at a hadith and says, I'm not going to act upon it. Usually when it seems like the madhab is not acting upon a hadith, like you mentioned, there's a reason. For example, did they even view that hadith as authentic? Number 1. Because viewing a hadith as authentic or not, it's not black or white. One scholar may view it as authentic, another one may not. Number 1, how do you understand the hadith? How do you understand the hadith in light of all the other evidences? Are you following? So there's always a reason. Sometimes it may seem that, the madhab is clearly going against this hadith. And we mentioned an example yesterday, but for the sake of time, I'm not going to repeat it. So in this case, there's a reason that the madhab, it would seem that they're going against the hadith. Number 1, either they didn't view the hadith as authentic, or there was another hadith that they reconciled with this hadith, and they put that hadith over this one. There's a reason, that's the main point. As for this, what they specifically say about this hadith, I'm not sure. But in general, it's important to know that whenever a madhab, it seems that it's going against the hadith, there's always a reason, whether it's their understanding of it or they didn't view the hadith as authentic.
It's on topic. So say you were leading us in prayer, we said subhanallah, and you finished the prayer, and you turned around and what happened, and then we said, you only prayed 2. You're saying you would restart,
yes,
or you would not pray 2 more.
So a lot of scholars said that, they said no, if you're talking about the salah, they said it's fine. But the madhab, his opinion is that any speech. There's a mas'ala of khilaf, there's difference of opinion. Naam. طيب, he says, تعمد الزيادة قهقهة إذا نافت العبادة. So he also mentions laughing. Why laughing? Because when you laugh, sound comes out. So they consider laughing to be a type of speech, because sound is coming out. So it would follow under the ruling of speech. And they also say coughing without a need. A person is just intentionally coughing, that would also break the salah, because that is considered speech. There are sounds that are coming out. But obviously, if there's a need, you need to clear it as something else. What about smiling? Does smiling break the salah? Blowing your nose? I'm not sure. I haven't come across it. And if there's a need, no, لا بأس. But there is that sound, because laughing, the sound is coming from your throat. To be sound has to come from your throat. So here the sound is not coming from the throat. Naam. Like, what about smiling? We said laughing breaks. What about smiling? No, because there's no sound. There's no sound. طيب. Going back to the mas'ala of a lot of movement. We said if there's a lot of continuous movement breaks salah. Have you guys heard of mas'ala mas'adiyya? It's a funny issue, something that happened. Basically, there was a conference or something in one of the countries in the Gulf. طيب. So it was like a big hotel room or whatever. It was a hotel-like building. So there was no musalla, so they would pray in the lobby. But there were so many people that the lobby would get full and you could not pray outside. So what they would do is, and the what's it called? The elevator was in the front facing the qibla. So what they did was they would put something to hold the door open of the elevator, and the imam would pray in the elevator so that the people behind him, they can use that extra row. Yani there's space. So to maximize space, they put the imam in the elevator. So while they're praying, the imam is sujood, a young child comes and he moves the thing and he presses floor 15. And the imam, he comes up from sujood and he's on floor 15. So afterwards they asked him, Shaykh, is the salah valid? Allahu A'lam. It's mas'ala mas'adiyya. طيب. Yeah. طيب, he says, deliberately, ta'ammudu ziyada, deliberately acting a physical pillar. For example, a person does an extra ruku', right? On purpose. He does an extra ruku' on purpose, an extra sujood on purpose. A physical pillar. That would break the salah. What if he repeats Fatiha? There's no problem. It's not a physical pillar. It's a one that comes from the tongue. So repeating the Fatiha, it does not break the pillar. It does not break the salah. But a person, for example, doing sujood twice or doing ruku' twice or doing sujood more times than he's supposed to, it's gonna break the pillar. طيب. Break the salah. طيب. We finished a salah. I'll give 3 minutes for questions. Go ahead.
Say you're maybe on your fourth rak'ah, and you're unsure what rak'ah you're on, but maybe in your head it's at 3 or vice versa. How would you go about finishing your?
طيب, we have a qaida, we have a rule that says al-yaqeen la yazulu bil-shak. What you're certain of takes precedence over uncertainty. So in this case, the question, by the way, was if I'm on my fourth rak'ah, but I'm not certain, I'm not sure, did I pray 3 or 4? What do? You take by what is less. Why? Because you're certain you prayed 3. You know for sure I prayed 3, but you're not sure about the 4th. So you go by what you're certain of. So you're certain that you did 3, so you would act as if this is the 3rd rak'ah. And then you would pray an extra one, and you do sujood al-sahw for forgetting.
Well, on what he said, there's the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You do what's less, and then you do sujood al-sahw. If you pray 5 and you do an extra one, then it's even, and it's like makes the devil forgot the word. But my question was, could you recite Fatiha twice?
What do you mean?
Like you say, and then what happens if you recite? I know it would never happen.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, I always wondered if you started reciting Fatiha again as your sunnah surah, what would happen?
It wouldn't break the salah. As for its ruling, is it recommended? Is it disliked? I don't remember if they mentioned it's mubah, it's permissible, or it's disliked. It's one of the two. It's not haram though. And it's obviously not sunnah. It's not recommended. It would be between mubah and disliked. As for which one, I don't remember exactly. No. So any other questions with salah? Yeah.
You said minimal movement is like allowed if needed.
Yeah.
When cracking knuckles
Is disliked. Yeah, but it's not going to break the salah. It's not going to break the salah. Any other questions for salah? We have 50 minutes. You think we can finish the book in 50 minutes? Honestly, these next ones we're not going to go into as detail because they're not as, and you're not going to face them on a day-to-day basis. But certain things that I feel are important, we're going to go into detail. If we don't finish, we'll go a little past Maghrib, but hopefully by Isha at the latest we'll finish. Inshallah by Maghrib, bi'idhnillah. طيب. Alright, we're going to get started on the fasl of zakah, the chapter of az-zakah. So he says, فَصْلُ الزَّكَاةِ شَرْطُهَا الْإِسْلَامُ حُرِّيَّةٌ مِلْكُ نِصَابٍ تَامُ. He says its conditions, he's going to talk about az-zakat and its conditions. He says its conditions are Islam and freedom, possession of the nisab, which is complete. Naam. So he mentions some conditions for zakah. What are these conditions? These are conditions for zakat to be obligatory on someone. Guys, pay attention. This is very important. When we were talking about conditions of salah and conditions of wudu, what were these conditions? Conditions for it to be valid. If you didn't meet the condition, your salah was not valid. If you didn't meet the condition for wudu, your wudu is not valid. Here, he's not talking about conditions for your zakat to be valid. He's talking about conditions for your zakat to be wajib upon you. Meaning zakat is not obligatory on every single person. You have to meet certain criteria for what zakat to be obligatory on you. So he mentions the first one is, before that actually, let's talk about zakat a little bit. What does zakat mean? Zakat has three meanings in the language. It can mean nama. Nama is like an increase. Or it can mean tahara. Tahara is purification. And it can also mean to praise. فَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ. Do not praise yourselves. So zakat can have three meanings. طيب, how did these meanings connect to the actual zakat? طيب, number one, zakat is the qareen of salah. I forgot to mention this. Whenever salah comes in the Quran, what comes with it? وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَآتُوا الزَّكَاةَ. That's why they mention zakat after as-salah, right? Because it's the next pillar and it's also the qareena, meaning the close companion. It's always with salah. طيب, so they mention it after salah. طيب, how, we said zakat is nama, it's an increase and it's a purification. How is it an increase? Number one, it's an increase for the money of the poor and also for the giver, right? The Prophet ﷺ tells us that no one gives money except that and his wealth will decrease. The Prophet ﷺ promises us that the one who gives money, his wealth is not going to decrease and is going to put barakah in his wealth. It's going to put barakah in his wealth. طيب, we said zakat is also purification. How is it purification? It purifies our hearts and our money. How does it purify our hearts? Your heart becomes soft when you're giving. Also, the poor people who don't have anything, they might have envy in them and jealousy and anger and hatred. But now when you're giving to them, those feelings are being removed. طيب, and it's also purifying your money. Because there's no single person except that usually there's maybe part of his money, there's some aspect of it being haram. So this is a purification for your money. By the way, zakat is very important and a lot of people, they take zakat lightly. Zakat is a pillar of Islam and not paying zakat out of stinginess or any other reason is a major sin. A major sin if someone does not pay zakat. If he's obligated to pay zakat, of course. The Prophet ﷺ said, if any owner of gold or silver does not pay what is due on him, when the day of judgment would come, plates of fire would be beaten out for him. These would then be heated in the fire of hell, and his sides, his forehead, and his back would be burned with them. And Allah is He's gonna burn him with these things, these plates of fire, for the person who did not give zakah. And when it cools down, these things that are burning him, they will be reheated to burn him again. Right? And this is for a day that is 50,000 years, just because a person did not give zakah. So zakah is not something that we should take lightly. So what is the meaning of zakat technically? Technically, zakat is حق واجب في مال مخصوص لطائفة مخصوصة في وقت مخصوص. It's three things. It's an obligatory payment from certain types of wealth. Zakat is not obligatory on every single type of wealth. And there are different types of wealth. For example, money is a type of wealth, but there's zakat due on other things. Certain animals, if you own them, you have to pay zakat on them. What are other things? Certain crops. If you have these crops, you have to pay zakat on them. What else? Children? You have to, for every child, you have to pay $100? No. We're talking about wealth. Wealth. For certain different types of wealth. Okay? We're going to get there. So it's not only for actual money you have, even gold and silver. A person has gold and silver, he has to pay zakat on it. We're going to mention the details. So it's an obligatory payment from certain types of wealth. Given to who? Certain groups of people. There are certain groups of people, as mentioned in the Quran, that you give zakat to. You cannot just give to any person you see on the street. No, there are conditions that person has to meet. So you cannot give zakat to any single person. There are certain people that can accept zakat. في وقت مخصوص. There's a specific time for zakah, which we're going to mention. When is that time? And that time is different for every single person. It's not like one time of the year like Hajj. No, it's different for every person. But he has to give it once a year. طيب. Number one, we talked about for zakat to be obligatory upon you, you have to meet certain conditions. Number one, you have to be a Muslim. If you're not a Muslim, zakat is not obligatory upon you. Here's the question. This is a mas'ala they study in usul fiqh. هل الكفار مخاطبون بفروع الشريعة؟ مثلا, are the kuffar, the non-Muslims, are they being addressed when Allah says وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةِ, pray and give zakah? Are they being addressed? Meaning, if they don't do these things, will they be sinful?
Yes.
What do you guys think?
Absolutely. If the kafir doesn't pray, they're a kafir. Of course, they're sinful. They have the worst sin only.
Yes. Every time they don't pray, they get sin. Every time they don't do an obligation, they get punished. What's the dalil for this? Who knows? Allah, He says in the Quran, مَا سَلَكَكُمْ فِي سَقَرٍ. He's going to ask, what brought you to the fire? He's talking to the kuffar. قَالُوا لَمْ نَكُ مِنَ الْمُصَلِّينَ. He said, we are not from the people who prayed. We did not pray. Meaning the reason we're in the fire is because we didn't pray. It shows that they will be punished for every single obligation that they left off. Naam. But that doesn't mean, when we say, so now, but here we're saying it's not wajib upon the kuffar. So is this not a contradiction? Here when they're saying it's not wajib, what they mean is that if he becomes a Muslim, it's not wajib for him to make it up. And also, it's not wajib for him until he becomes, there's something in between that's wajib first, which is becoming Muslim. So they mean that before it's directly wajib upon him, he has to become Muslim first. But it doesn't mean that he's not going to be punished. Because no, every time he does not pay zakah, he's getting punished. There's a punishment for that. Jizya, mashallah. The second condition is that he has to be a free man. He cannot be a slave. Obviously, we don't really have that anymore now. But a slave, because a slave himself is money. A slave he cannot own. And anything he owns belongs to his owner. So he's not considered or required to pay zakah. And by the way, when we say slavery, do not let your mind go to the slavery that happened in America or slavery by the kuffar. The Islamic slavery was completely different than that. And even the slaves had rights and na'am. So it's not, there was no injustice that was being done. طيب. The next one is the nisab. What is nisab? Nisab is the minimum amount of money that you have to have for zakat to be obligatory upon you. A person has $10. Do we say you have to pay zakat on that? He only has $10 to his name. No, you have to reach a certain threshold before zakat is obligatory upon you. What is this threshold? We're going to talk about it. And also, you have to take away any debts or expenses. For example, let's just say, theoretically, the nisab is $1,000. A person has $1,000, but he has a debt that he has to pay that is $500, or an expense that is $500. But he has 1,000 right now. Does he have to pay zakah? No. Because after taking away from his expenses and debts, it goes below the nisab. طيب. The third one, or is that the third? No, the third one, no, fourth, is that he has to have complete ownership. Okay? You have to have complete ownership. What does complete ownership mean? It means you may have the money and it reached the threshold, but you don't completely own it. I'll give you an example. For example, they say money that you can't access. If you cannot access the money, you're not considered a complete owner of it. For example, there's a debt that is owed to you. Someone owes you $1,000 or $10,000, but you cannot access it right now. He says, I can't give it to you. Do you have to pay zakah for that money? Even though it's yours, you own it, but you don't have complete ownership of it. Do you have to pay? No. You only pay once you are able to access it, or he gives it to you. طيب. Islam, he has to be Muslim. He has to be a free man. He can't be a slave. And it has to have reached the nisab. Nisab, we said, is the minimum, the bare minimum. The fourth one, we said complete ownership. Yes, like retirement plans. Scholars mentioned retirement plans. If you cannot access it, right, some of them you cannot access. If you cannot access, you do not have to pay zakah because you cannot fully access it. Questions after. Save the question though, save the question. طيب, the next one, he says the passing of a lunar year. Okay, we have the Gregorian calendar and we have the Islamic or lunar calendar. The lunar calendar is about what, 355 days? I think. And then, no, how much is the Gregorian? 365. طيب, the lunar is like 10 days less, roughly. So that means every lunar year. Okay? So for example, the moment a person reaches nisab, he has to have that money for 1 year. Let's say the nisab is $1,000. And he has $1,000 and he's had over 1,000 for 1 year. From the moment he's had the nisab, he marks that day. And then a year from then, he pays zakah on whatever money he has. Like usually people, they set a certain day for themselves. It might be the 1st of Ramadan, it might be the 27th, it might be the last day of Ramadan, it might be whatever day. You have the same day every year, you have to pay zakah, because zakah is wajib once a year on the money that you had for that last year. And it's not the Gregorian calendar. So do not set it, for example, January 1st. Every January 1st, I'm going to pay zakah. Why is that problematic? Because it's for every lunar year. And the lunar year will actually finish before the Gregorian calendar. For example, January 1st, let's say it was the 1st of Muharram, okay? The next January 1st would be like Muharram, day 10. So you actually delayed it by 10 days. Do you understand? That's why you should not pay based on the Gregorian calendar. It has to be based on the Islamic calendar. So set it based on the Islamic months. For example, 1st of Ramadan, 15th of Ramadan, 27th, whatever day you want it to be, you set that day and you pay zakat every time on that day. طيب. Then he says, وَحَوْلُ غَيْرِ خَارِجٍ مِنْ أَرْضِ وَغَيْرِ رِبْحٍ وَنِتَاجٍ يَمْضِي. He says in the passing of a lunar year, we covered that, except in the case. So now he mentions exceptions to the lunar year. There are certain exceptions, certain wealth that you don't have to hold for a whole year. He says, things that come out of the earth, and except in the case of prophets and offspring. So as we mentioned, there are different wealth that you pay zakat on. It's not only money. Also livestock. For example, 3 animals that you pay zakat on, or 4, is the what? Camel, cow, and sheep or goat. These 4 animals you have to pay zakat on it, depending on if you have a certain amount. It's really not going to apply to us, so we're not going to go into too much detail. It's good to know that, okay, if you have a certain amount of sheep, or you have a certain amount of goat, or a certain amount of cow or camels, you have to pay zakat on that. Because back then, this is how people stored their wealth, through their animals. Most of their wealth may have been through their animals. And the whole idea of zakat is so that people do not hoard money. We don't want people to just hold money for themselves. So if back then, this is how people are holding all their money, it's in their animals, you have to pay zakat on that. طيب. Also, you pay zakat on things that come from the earth, certain crops. It's not all crops, but certain ones you pay zakat on, certain crops and fruits. طيب. So right now we're talking about the exceptions for the lunar year. The first one, he says, that which comes out of the earth. Okay, agricultural produce. When is the time for zakat for these? Right when it's harvested. When it is ripe and you harvest it, that is when you have to give zakat on them. You don't give zakat 1 year, you don't hold it for 1 year, and then, no, right when you harvest it, you give zakat on this. It's not going to apply to most of us, so we're going to go through this quickly. طيب. The next one he mentioned is that, they say, ربح تجارة, profit that was gained from an original investment. For example, a person has money, $10,000, and he uses his money to invest. For example, he buys things and he sells them. Right? Let's say he buys, I don't know, what's something that people resell? Sneakers. He buys sneakers, right? Let's say, طيب, at the beginning of the year, he has $10,000. After 1 year, we said he has to pay zakat on whatever money he owns. Let's say after 11 months, this $10,000, he starts trading with it. He buys sneakers and he resells them. And then in month 11, the money that he has is 30,000. So he had 10,000 in the beginning, and then he had 20 that he got in month 11. Those 20,000, does he have to wait 1 year for it? Or does he pay it with, we said it's here, then it's going to follow the timing of the original money. So the original money he had was at 11 months ago. So here the profit, it follows the original money. So basically profit, any profit that person gets from an investment, the money that he has, is going to follow the original capital that he used to make that profit. Okay? As we mentioned, if a person has 10,000, he invests it, and then 11 months in, let's say he invested in something, I don't know, a company or whatever. Or let's say he bought a product, okay? and he buys this for money, for the intention of it being money, right? And the value of that product, at month 11, it goes to 50,000. He has to pay on the entire 50, not just the 10. So it doesn't have to pass 1 year for the extra profit he made. The profit will follow the original capital that you used to invest it. طيب. Then we mentioned livestock. We mentioned certain animals. If you have them for 1 year, you have to pay zakat on them. طيب, what if the animal, as we're not going to go in detail, but I'll tell you very quickly. If a person has 5 camels, for example, he pays 1 sheep. He has 5 camels, he has to pay 1 sheep. If he has 10 camels, he pays 2 sheep. طيب, what if he has 9 camels? He only pays 1 because he didn't reach 10 yet. طيب, what if one of the camels is pregnant and has a baby camel, and after 11 months, it gives birth? In month 11, it gives birth, and now there's 10 camels. We said if there's 10 camels, he has to give 2 sheep. But the last camel he's only had for 1 month. We said that you have to have for 1 year. But this is one of the exceptions. This camel, because it's an offspring of the original, it follows the timing, the hawl. Hawl is the 1 year. Follows the hawl of the original animals that gave birth to it. طيب? Hopefully that makes sense. He mentions another condition. This is specific for animals. We said that the animals, it has to be free grazing. We mentioned it's for the camel, for the cow, and the sheep or the goat. But there are conditions, not just any cow, it's not just any, it has to be free grazing. What does that mean? It means that animals that feed themselves, an owner doesn't feed them. Why? Because if an owner feeds them, he's spending his own money to feed them. So he's already spending money, so we're not going to make him pay zakat. But if they're eating themselves, now we have to pay zakat. This is not going to apply to most of us, but if you have camels, inshallah, we can talk after. طيب. Then he says, النقد والأنعام والعروض وخارج al-Fitr ذي فروض. Now he's going to talk about the things, we already mentioned them, but the things in which zakat is obligatory. The first one, he says an-naqd, which is currency. So currency includes gold, silver, and in our day and age, money, paper money. طيب. Gold and silver, the minimum amount of silver, if a person has silver, the minimum amount for him is that it's 595 grams of silver. Okay? That is the nisab for silver. So if he has 595 grams of silver, he has to pay zakat on that. If he has less than that, he does not pay zakat on that. Like, what about for gold? He has 85 grams. It is 85 grams of gold. If a person has 85 grams of gold or more, he has to pay zakah on it. What if he has less than 85? He does not pay zakah. And if we took the value of that, the silver, it would be about $1,100, and the gold would be about 11,000. It's a big difference. There's another thing. What if a person, let's say the nisab is whatever, let's say $1,000. For the entire year, he has above 1,000, but then at one point in the year, let's say month 6, it goes under the nisab for 1 week, for example. He goes bankrupt. And then a week later, he gets his money back. Does it reset the timing, or does he continue? It resets. So if you go below the nisab, it resets. طيب. To make it easy in our day and age, a person should have 1 day of the year where he pays zakah. Right? Naam. And then he looks at how much money he has at that point and takes away from the expenses, and he pays zakah on that. Make it simple for himself. طيب. Do we take by the nisab of silver or gold? The Ḥanbalīs, they mention that you should take the nisab of the one that is going to be better for the poor people. So they mention in today's day and age it would be silver. But maybe back then, let's say there was a time where silver was more valuable than gold. Then you would take the nisab by gold if it was worth less. It would be the one that's worth less because that is more beneficial for the poor. Naam. طيب, what about jewelry? Gold and silver, that's jewelry. The madhab, there's a difference of opinion on this, but they mention that if it's jewelry that was intended for wearing, right? If a woman has jewelry that is intended for wearing, she does not have to pay zakah on it. Like, even if you don't really wear it a lot, even if they say if you wear it once a year, but you have this for wearing, you don't have to pay zakah. But there's a condition. The jewelry has to be halal. Can jewelry be haram? Na'am. مثلا, a man has gold. Man is not allowed to wear gold. This is jewelry, but it's haram. He has to pay zakah. He has to pay zakah. Obviously, for a woman, it's not haram to wear gold as long as it's the norm. Na'am. طيب. And then he mentions livestock. We're not going to go into it. He says, عروض التجارة. What is عروض التجارة? عروض التجارة are trade merchandise. For example, they are actual physical things that are intended for trade in order to make profit. Right? They're not intended, you don't have these things, these objects for use. That's not the intention. The intention is that you have these specifically for trade. For example, a person owns a shoe store, and these shoes that he has in the store, they have value, there's no doubt. Maybe the shoes in the store are worth $100,000. Does he have these shoes because he wants to wear them? No, he has them for selling. So these fall into this category. So how would he pay zakah? He would take the value of all the shoes, and then he would pay zakah on them. He would have to pay zakah. He would have to pay 2.5%. Naam? At the Allah. I think there's a difference of opinion. I'm not sure. Allah. That's a good question. No. طيب. Then there's earthly yields, or it includes agricultural produce, which are crops and fruits, are minerals and metals, right? Minerals and metals that come from the ground, there's zakah that has to be paid. Also certain crops and certain fruits. Also honey, buried treasure. In our day and age, it's not really gonna apply. They mentioned that the condition though, for the crops, they have to be something that is measured by volume, something that doesn't go bad, right? So like apples, if a person just had a bunch of apples, and let's say that the value reached the nisab, would he have to pay zakah? No. Why? Because apples go bad. Cannot be anything that goes bad, right? But let's say there's something like rice, it doesn't go bad, and he had like, I don't know, a lot of rice, or he had dates, a lot of dates that the value is over the nisab, he would have to pay zakah on that. In our day and age, it's not really common. طيب. طيب, let's go to Zakatul Fitr. Naam, because he mentioned وَالْفِطْرُ ذِي فُرُوضِ. There's another type of zakat called Zakatul Fitr. Everything we covered before, all those categories for money and for agricultural produce and for what else? Livestock and all these different things. This is called Zakatul Mal, the zakat of wealth. We have another zakat called Zakatul Fitr. This is zakat of fitr, which is the one that is obligatory at the end of Ramadan. It's an obligatory charity that you give at the end of Ramadan. What is the purpose of this zakat? We said the first one is to purify the wealth. This one is to purify a person's fast, because there's no doubt a person when he's fasting, he's going to have shortcomings. So this is like a purification for the fast. And also, it's going to be Eid after. We want to give to the poor, those who don't have anything to celebrate with. It's also beneficial for them. So it benefits the one who is fasting in the sense that it's a purification for his fast and also for the poor people. طيب. So Zakatul Fitr, there's not really any nisab, right? As long as someone has enough for his daily needs and necessities, it's basically required on everyone, unless the person just has nothing. But if a person has enough for that day, the day of Eid, then he's required to pay Zakatul Fitr. So it is due from everyone who has enough for themselves and those who they're responsible for the day of Eid. For example, a father, and he has enough for him and his children for that day, he has to pay Zakatul Fitr. Naam. And this is at the end of Ramadan. It is at the end of Ramadan. And there are certain times we're going to mention why you can pay it. And how much does he pay? And what does he pay? Can he pay money? The madhab is you cannot pay money. I think only the Hanafiya, they allow paying money. The others say no. So Ḥanbalī say it has to come from one of 5 things. It has to come from wheat, barley, dates, raisin, or cottage cheese. They mentioned these 5 categories, and it comes from a hadith that these are the things that you pay zakat al-fitr. How much of these things it has to be? They call it 1 sa'. 1 sa', which is 2.4 kilograms roughly. So 2.4 kilograms of wheat or barley or dates or raisin, you would donate this to the poor. And they mention if you cannot do these, anything that is storable and it's considered like a staple, like rice, beans, corn, any of these would be fine. So at the end of Ramadan, you guys might remember that people are bringing in rice and they're bringing in different things. This is Zakat al-Fitr. طيب. When can you give Zakat al-Fitr? And by the way, this might cost like $10. Get 2.4 kilograms of rice. It's not going to cost a lot. طيب. One is Zakat. When can a person pay Zakat al-Fitr? When does he pay it? There are different times, but the earliest you can pay is 2 days before before Eid, the end of Ramadan. 2 days before that you can pay. Anything before that you cannot. طيب. But the best time is the day of Eid, because the whole purpose is so that the poor on the day of Eid, they have food and they have things. So the best time is that before the Eid prayer, you give it. That's why you may notice that Eid al-Fitr, we pray it what? Later or earlier than Adha? Which one comes first? The timing. For example, at GCLEA, one of them we pray at 7 and one we pray at 10. This is intentional. One of them was delayed. Which one is delayed? Eid al-Fitr. Fitr is delayed. Why? Because it's recommended to give before the prayer, the Zakat al-Fitr. So to give people time, they delayed Eid al-Fitr. Whereas Eid al-Adha is at 7. Why? Because people are going to slaughter after the Salah. So Eid al-Adha is earlier to give people time to slaughter later on. طيب. So the best time is that before the prayer on the day of Eid. What about after the prayer the day of Eid? It's valid, but it's disliked. It's valid, but it's disliked. But he's not sinful. He's not sinful. As long as you do on Eid, the day of Eid, whether the night before the Salah, after the Salah, as long as it's before Maghrib, by the time Eid ends, if you do Zakat al-Fitr, you are fine. If you pay after that, you get sin. But you still have to do it. You still have to pay the Zakat after, but you get sin if it's after. طيب. Usually today, we're not actually giving it to the poor. What do? We give it to an organization or we give it to the Masjid and they distribute it. Does that mean I have to give it 2 days before to the organization? No. You can give it a month before, right? But if they have to distribute it within that time that we mentioned. If you give money to the organization and they get to eat, I'm not sure. Allah A'lam. And by the way, zakah, it should be given to the poor of your area. Because it comes in the hadith, Prophet ﷺ mentioned that يُؤْخَذْ مِنْ أَغْنِيَائِهِمْ وَيُعْطَى فُقَرَائِهِمْ. He said it's taken from their rich and given to their poor. أو كما قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم, meaning the people of that area. But some scholars today, they allowed it giving abroad, especially if there's more of a need for the people abroad. فلا حرج في هذا والله أعلم. طيب, we finish الزكاة. Next we're going to go to الصوم. فصل الصيام واجب في شهر أي رمضان من طلوع الفجر. Number 1, what is صيام? He's saying صيام or صوم is fasting. Okay? And it's obligatory in 1 month, which is Ramadan. Any other time after that is Sunnah. What is the definition of صوم in the language? It means imsak. Imsak means to stay away or to abstain. To abstain. طيب, but the technical definition is إمساك عن شيء مخصوص أو زمن مخصوص من شخص مخصوص بنية مخصوصة. نعم. It is staying away from a specific thing. It should be في زمن مخصوص, at a specific time, by a specific person with a specific intention. You're staying away from certain things at a specific time, يعني from Fajr to Maghrib, by a specific person, and it's only obligatory on specific people with a specific intention. طيب. نعم. There are 2 things that we have to stay away from. One are things that actually break your fast. And the second are things that they don't break your fast, but they take away from the reward. For example, a person, let's say, he fasted, but the whole day he was cursing. Is his fast valid? It's valid. Cursing does not break the fast, but his reward is diminished. Because what is the whole point of fasting? It is that it's not just staying away from food and drink, right? But you stay away from, if these are things that are halal, we stay away from them. The things that are haram, even more we should stay away from. طيب. So now we're going to talk about the things that actually break the fast. So we said it's obligatory in Ramadan from sunrise to sunset. نعم. He says إلى غروب الشمس عن إدخال شيء إلى الجوف بأي حال وعن جماع وعن الإمناء كذا المباشرة مع إمذاء. طيب. He says والاستقاء وكذا الحجامة لصائم مفسدة صيامه. طيب. He mentions things that break the fast. He says the first one is that things that will reach the stomach or any bodily cavity. Okay? What is the bodily cavity? It is anything that contains space and is not solid in the body. Anything that contains space in the body, if something gets in there, whether it's something that nourishes like food or not, it will break the fast. It doesn't have to be nourishing in the madhab. There are other opinions that say no, it has to be actually something that gives you nourishment. What are examples of that? Such as the stomach, or the brain, or the throat, or the abdomen, or the chest, or the back passage, right? Or the private parts of a woman. All of these things are open passages. If something gets in there, it will break the fast. What about the nose and the ears and the eyes? What do you guys think? These things are connected to the throat. Right? A lot of people, they'll tell you that they put something in their nose and they'll feel it in their throat. Or they'll put something in their ears and they'll feel it in the throat. Or the eyes. They put eye drops and they'll feel it in the throat. So putting it in these three, the ears, the eyes, the nose, doesn't necessarily break the fast. It only breaks the fast if you're certain that it got to the throat. For example, you put eye drops and then you feel it in your throat, you know for sure that it got to your throat, the fast is broken. The moment it gets to your throat, the fast is broken. The fast is broken. Just putting something in your mouth is not going to break the fast. But if it goes into your throat, it's going to break the fast. طيب? And any bodily cavity, as you mentioned, it's not just the stomach. Right? نعم. وعن جماع وعن الإمناء كذا المباشرة مع إمذاء. He says, in abstaining from intercourse and from ejaculation, likewise from foreplay with the release of pre-ejaculatory fluid. طيب. He said, number one, intercourse. If a person, he does intercourse, obviously it's going to break the fast. And this is the only thing where he actually has to pay an expiation. Right? The other ones, if you do it, you're going to get sin. You're going to get sin and the fast will be broken. This one, if you do it, you get sin, the fast is broken, and you have to pay something. What do you have to do? What is the punishment? They say, number one, you free a free slave that is able to work. Okay, today it's not going to apply. So then you go down the list. The second thing after that, if you can't do that, you have to fast 2 months consecutively. 2 months straight. You cannot miss a day. Because of this punishment. And if a person cannot do that, he has to feed 60 poor people. Right? But only if he cannot do the previous one. If he can fast 2 months, and when we say he's able to, it doesn't mean like, oh, it's difficult. No. Like a person who's very old, and medically he cannot fast, he would be excused. But someone who's young, even if he finds it difficult, that's not an excuse. He still has to fast 2 months. Then he mentions ejaculation, يعني the release of seminal fluid. How would this happen? Either by repeatedly looking. Okay, by repeatedly looking. Some people just from looking, they may release. This would break the fast. Not by one look. If it's just one look, it's forgiven. But if it's repeatedly looking, it would break the fast. Or masturbation or foreplay or any other touching, this would also break the fast if ejaculation happened. Not by mere thought. Right? If a person is just thinking, some people just thinking, and then it may cause them to release. That would not break the fast. It will not break the fast. They mentioned this, but because they mentioned that whatever is a person's thoughts, he's forgiven of. But it came to me while I was reviewing that, like, there's a difference between someone who just has a thought and someone who's intentionally thinking and entertaining the thought. Allahu A'lam, I don't know the ruling on this. But they mentioned if it's just a thought that, definitely if he cannot control it, it's a thought that comes, he's forgiven. As for intentionally thinking about this, I'm not sure if this would apply. طيب. These are the 3 cases, either by looking or by touching, but not by thought. By thought, we said is forgiven. طيب. He said also foreplay with the release of preseminal fluid. So we have many and we have madhi. Many is seminal fluid, and madhi is the pre-seminal fluid. طيب. In the case of many we just mentioned, what about for madhi, the pre-seminal fluid? In the case of looking, madhi, if madhi comes out, it's forgiven. Right? So for many we mentioned if looking or touching. This would be the two cases for many. For madhi, if it comes out through looking, it's forgiven. If it comes out through touching, it's not forgiven. نعم. طيب. Then he says, والاستقاء وكذا الحجامة. So for example, a man kissing his wife, it's not going to break the fast necessarily. But if pre-seminal fluid comes out, it breaks the fast. نعم. So it's best to just avoid it completely. والاستقاء وكذا الحجامة لصائم مفسدة صيامة. He says deliberately vomiting and similarly cupping, and for the fasting person it invalidates his fast. طيب, he said deliberately vomiting, not unintentionally. If a person unintentionally vomits, it does not break the fast. But he intentionally vomits. He puts his hands in his mouth, or however people intentionally vomit, that would break the fast. He also says it's hijama. Hijama is like cupping, right? And they mention only if blood comes out. So if a person does hijama and blood comes out, that would break the fast. And this is something yesterday we mentioned, or was it today? Today we mentioned there are certain things that are called ta'abbudi, which means that we don't know the actual reasoning. Hijama is one of those things. It's ta'abbudi. There's no doubt there's a reason why it breaks the fast, but we do not know the reason. There's no apparent reason to us. Like we said, why is tawaf 7 times? Why is dhuhr 4 rak'ahs? It's the same thing here. Why does hijama break the fast? Some of them said that, this is because the blood comes out. But in the madhab, there's no qiyas here. What does that mean? That means a person taking out blood in another way would not break the fast. It's only for hijama specifically. So modern day things, mention giving out blood or blood tests, that would not invalidate. What about an IV? An IV would, because it eventually goes to the body. But what about eye, nose, and eardrops? We mentioned that not necessarily, but if he knows for certain it goes to the throat, it will break. But most of the time it's probably going to go to the throat, so he should just avoid it. Do not take the risk. Naam. There are conditions for the previous things we just mentioned. It's not every single person who does these. For example, if a person did it and he didn't remember he was fasting, he drank, well, I think we forgot the first one, drinking or eating, of course. That would break the fast. طيب. If a person drinks water, not forgetting he was fasting, does it break? No, it doesn't. So there are 3 conditions. Number 1, he has to be amid, which means he has to intend the act. So it can't be accidental. Number 2, he has to be mukhtar. He has to choose to do it. He cannot be forced. If he was forced to do something, it does not break the fast. For example, someone puts a gun to his head and says, drink water. If he drinks water, his fast is still valid because he's forced. And also, ذَاكِرًا لِصَوْمِهِ. He remembered that he was fasting. He didn't forget that he was fasting. This doesn't mean, by the way, he's not forgiven if a person didn't know that this specific thing broke fast. For example, he didn't know that hijama breaks fast, and he does hijama. Does it break the fast?
Yes.
It does. It does. So here when they say that he remembers, they didn't mention that he's ignorant. Being ignorant that this thing breaks your fast is not an excuse. It's not an excuse. So that shows the importance of learning. That in this case, even if you didn't know, you're not forgiven. طيب.
So if he didn't know that intercourse would break the fast, he would have to fast for 60 days.
I don't know how that's possible, but Allah A'lam. In this specific example, I'm not sure.
But that fast
It's definitely broken. It's definitely broken. طيب. He says, فصل وجوب حجة الإسلام وعمرة فورا على الأنام. Now he's going to talk about Hajj, which is the last pillar. طيب, number 1, or should we stop here and then finish after Maghrib? طيب, I think 30 more minutes will be done, inshallah. 30 more minutes will be done. طيب, we have 5 minutes before the adhan, so any questions? Yeah. طيب. Yeah. You have a what? Yeah. Allah A'lam. I don't know. I'm not going to give a fatwa, I don't know. Yeah. To add a little swing. Number one, we said this is Sunnah. We said it's Sunnah. So if he does this or this, Allah, I don't know. I don't know.
You were saying like when you're praying and like you're not wearing a shirt, you have to at least cover one shoulder. Does it matter which shoulder?
No, any shoulder. Any shoulder. Nah, man, they mentioned for the nafil, for Sunnah, you don't have to cover any. But obviously, you mentioned from adab, you're not gonna do this. Nah. We said about the revealing of the awrah. To break the salah, there's two conditions. It's to be a long in time and long in a lot. So this is a small amount, and it might be a small time. It's not the whole salah, maybe only when you bend. When you're standing, it's fine. So it's not going to break. Yeah, it's a small amount. So it should be fine, inshallah.
So if we're praying behind the imam and we're praying a 4 rak'ah prayer and he stands up for a 5th rak'ah and everyone is behind him says subhanallah, subhanallah, subhanallah. For whatever reason it doesn't click and he keeps going. Is it best for the jama'ah to stay seated until he gets down and they salam out together? Or do they join him in the 5th rak'ah?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
It happened in the
Yeah.
Prophet's time.
No, I'm saying that.
But people say, well, there's a Prophet
I'm not sure.
Other than the reasons you mentioned for the fasting 60 days specifically, like let's say someone after puberty, for whatever reason they intentionally broke the fast down to they didn't fast, like they intentionally
Yeah.
like during Ramadan, whatever. Would they be required then? This is like they had this is after they reached puberty. Would they be required then to do the
No, the 60 days we mentioned is only for if he broke it through intercourse. To all the other ones, he gets sin. He has to make up the fast, but there's no money or any expiation he has to do. So the 60 days is only for that situation.
Someone with special needs considered not have
It would probably depend on what the condition is, you know? And also how much no. Allahu A'lam. Sallallahu alaihi wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad. We'll continue after Salah, inshallah. Alhamdulillah wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We left off on line 40. We finished the section of az-zakah. So zakah is what pillar of Islam? Second? Third? Fourth? Or sixth? It's the third. But we said in fiqh, we're only dealing with the four, in fiqh ibadat, we're only dealing with the 4 pillars. We're not dealing with shahada. Shahada, they talk about it in the books of aqidah, because there's not physical rulings related to it. So, but zakah we talked about, salah was zakah we talked about, and then we have, what's the next pillar after zakah? As-sawm we talked about, and then hajj is the 5th pillar that we're going to talk about. So this is the last pillar, and afterwards the author, he's going to start talking about buying and selling. So we mentioned that fiqh is 4 categories. We said ibadat, which is everything related to acts of worship. Then we said it's mu'amalat, financial transactions, and all the types of financial transactions that would come under that. And then we have usra, fiqh al-usra, everything related to nikah and talaq. And then we have jinayat, which is like penal codes and punishments. Yeah. Here's a question. Why do they put mu'amalat over fiqh al-usra? Why do they put financial transactions before family matters? We said that the order in the books of fiqh is intended. They didn't just randomly do this. No, there's a reason. Why did they follow this order? After ibadat, we can understand why they put first, the most important, so on. What about mu'amalat? Why is that second after worship? Naam. They mentioned that a person's need for selling and buying and trade and financial transactions is more than his need for nikah and these kind of things. And it's more people will deal with these things than nikah. A person may or may not get married, right? But who is there any person that accepts that he's going to buy and sell and own? And no. So the need for it is more, it's more common, so they put it first. طيب, so right now we have Hajj, and then we said Bay', and then we said the last thing is Nikah. There's one line in the book where he's going to talk about Nikah. That's it. Just one line. Because remember, this book is about Fard Ayn. It's only the things that are Fard Ayn. So most Furud Ayn, the things that are Fard Ayn, is going to be in Ibadat and some transactions, and then Nikah. طيب. But if you want more about Nikah, in the longer books, inshallah. طيب, he says, فصل وجوب حجة الإسلام وعمرة فورا على الأنام. He says the section of the obligation of Hajj and Umrah on mankind without delay. طيب. Number one, what is Hajj? We said every word has what? A linguistic definition and a definition as a science in the Sharia. Al-Hajj لغة is al-qasd or qasd shay'in mu'azzam. When you intend something great. القصد إلى من تعظمه, or intending something, or intending to visit someone, or something that you honor or respect. That's what Hajj means in lugha. طيب, as a science, it means قصد مكة للنسك في زمن مخصوص وهو أحد أركان الإسلام. It means going to Mecca to perform certain rituals at a specific time. So number one, Hajj you can only do in Mecca, of course. طيب. And you only do a specific time. What month is Hajj in? Dhul Hijjah. It's Dhul Hijjah. It's not like Umrah. Umrah you can do it any time of the year. But Hajj, there's specific days that you do Hajj. Everyone does Hajj. You cannot do Hajj other than those days. طيب. And there's specific rituals. There's certain things you do. You go to Mina, and then you go to Arafah, and then Muzdalifah, and then you go do Tawaf, and so on and so forth. There are certain things you have to do. That is what Hajj is. طيب. Someone asked me a question once. It's a funny question. It's not funny, it's a serious question actually. He said, if a person is fasting in Ramadan and he's doing Hajj, is he allowed to break his fast? What do you guys think? He's fasting Ramadan, is he allowed to break his fast while he's doing Hajj? The answer is no, of course. Hajj is in Dhul Hijjah, Ramadan is Ramadan. Yasir is still thinking. No, making up the fast, we're not talking about that. Like making up the fast. Allah, in that case, I don't know. I don't know why you would fast in Hajj, but Hajj is very tiring. طيب. So what about Umrah? Al-Umrah في اللغة, in the Arabic language, Umrah means ziyarah. It means to visit or visiting. And in Sharia, it means ziyaratul bayt ala wajh makhsus. It means to visit the bayt, يعني the Kaaba, in a specific manner, in a specific way, right? You go to the Kaaba and there's certain things you do. That is what is Umrah. So the difference between Hajj and Umrah is only at the Kaaba. It's at the Kaaba, you do tawaf at the Kaaba, and then you do sa'i. But it's all in that area. Whereas Hajj, you're going to Mina, and you're going to Muzdalifah, and you're going to Arafah, which is not at the Kaaba. It's a little farther out. طيب. So Umrah specifically at the Kaaba and the Masjid al-Haram, whereas Hajj is, there's other things that you do outside. طيب. What is the ruling on Hajj and Umrah? Are they wajib? Are they sunnah? Is one of them wajib, one of them sunnah? Hajj is wajib for whoever is able to. طيب. What about Umrah? طيب, al-madhab is wajib. In the madhab, you have to do both Umrah and Hajj. They're both wajib. He He says على الفور. What does على الفور mean? على الفور means immediately, right when you have the ability to. Right when you have the capability, you're not allowed to delay. Some madhahib يجب على التراخي. It's not, like, for example, a person is financially capable and physically capable and he has all the conditions. In our madhab, right when you meet the conditions, you have to do Hajj. You cannot delay it. Some people, they're able to do Hajj and they delay it for years and years and years and years. This is sinful. Huh? So he should not delay Hajj. The moment he's able to, he should do Hajj. And this is for Hajj and Umrah. He'd do it. And they're both wajib. There are conditions for Hajj. Hajj is not obligatory on every single person. Right or wrong? Do you have to Hajj right now? Sure? There are conditions. So these are shurut wujub, conditions to be obligatory. He says the first one, بِشَرْطِ إِسْلَامٍ كَذَا حُرِّيَّةٍ عَقْلٌ بُلُوغٌ قُدْرَةٌ شَرْعِيَّةٌ. He says the conditions, number one, he says, with the condition of Islam. Meaning a person is not a Muslim. Is Hajj obligatory upon him? No. We talked about what that means. That means if he became Muslim, he's not required to do it again. He's not required to do Hajj. Afwan. And that wouldn't apply here. But it means that before he does Hajj, he has to do something else, which is become Muslim. So that's what we mean when we say it's not obligatory. Meaning there's a step in between, which is becoming Muslim, and then Hajj will be obligatory on him. But he is punished, we said, for the furu' of Sharia. Every time there's an amr in the Quran that says pray, and it says fast, and it says do Hajj, he will get sin for these. Now, he says كذا حرية. Actually, before I get into this, I'll mention something. When we say conditions, there are different kinds of conditions. There are certain conditions for it to be obligatory upon you. What does that mean? It means if you don't meet this condition, it's not obligatory upon you. There are certain conditions for it to be valid. Meaning, if you don't meet this condition, it's not going to be valid. Your Hajj will not be valid. And there are certain conditions for the Hajj to count as the Hajj of Islam. مثلا, a person can do Hajj, but it doesn't lift the obligation from him. We're going to talk about examples. For example, if a little kid, he does Hajj, does that lift the obligation? We said it's obligatory one time in his lifetime. Does that lift the obligation of Hajj on him? No. So we have different types of conditions. Al-Islam, the first condition is a condition of what? It's a condition of obligation and validity. To be valid, you have to be a Muslim, meaning if a kafir does Hajj, is it valid? It's not valid from him. Is it obligatory on him? It's not obligatory. So Islam is both obligatory and to be valid. What about hurriya? Hurriya means he's a freed man. He's not a slave. Okay? So that means is a shart of to be an obligation or to be accepted or to lift the obligation of Hajj? Which one? Meaning, let's say we have a person who's a slave. Is he obligated to do Hajj? No. If he does Hajj, is it valid from him? What do you guys think? It's valid. It's valid. His Hajj is valid. Does it lift off the obligation of Hajj? We said every Muslim, he has to do Hajj one time. He's a slave man. We said it's valid, but does it lift off the obligation? Yeah, if he became freed, would he have to do Hajj again? Or no? He has to do it again. So it's a condition for it to be obligatory and for it to lift the obligation. You guys got it? Meaning if he becomes free, he has to do it again. But it's not a condition to be valid. Meaning a slave, if he does Hajj, he gets ajr and it's accepted from him. But it doesn't lift the obligation. You guys see how there's different types of conditions? Whereas Islam, you need it for all three. If you're not a Muslim, it's not going to be accepted. It's not going to raise the obligation. It's not obligatory on you to begin with. What about al-aqlu? Sanity is the next condition. Meaning, let's say a person is not sane. Is it obligatory upon him? Is it valid if he does it? No. No, it's not valid. So obviously if it's not valid, it's not going to raise the obligation. It's not going to lift the obligation. You guys understand the difference between it being valid and lifting the obligation. It may be valid and accepted from you, like for the slave, but but it doesn't lift the obligation. واضح؟ طيب. Then we have al-bulugh. Bulugh means reaching puberty. طيب. What about bulugh? A person who reached puberty. For example, meaning if we have someone who did not reach puberty, is it obligatory on him? No. Is it accepted from him? Is it valid? Yes. And this is one of the exceptions. We said that there's something called timyiz, which is the age of discernment, which is how many years old? 7 years old. So we said under 7, no action is accepted. There is no act that is accepted before 7. This is the one exception. They say for a person who is doing Hajj, if he's a little kid, he's 3 years old, 4 years old, 5 years old, he gets the reward. And his Hajj is valid. Him and his guardian get the reward. طيب, does it lift the obligation? No, it doesn't lift up. Meaning if once he hits puberty, a child reaches puberty, he has to still do Hajj. For example, someone did Hajj when he's 5. And now when he's 15, he's like, oh, I already did Hajj when I was 5, I don't have to do it. No, you have to do it. You guys got it? طيب. So basically, a person who's insane and a kafir, these two people, it's not valid from him and it's not obligatory upon him. It's not valid and not obligatory if he's insane and he's a kafir. Either of these. طيب. The person who has not hit puberty or is a slave. These two. A person has not hit puberty, we said it's going to be valid, but he still has to do Hajj al-Islam. It doesn't lift the obligation. And it's not obligatory, of course. The same thing with a slave. It's not obligatory, but it is valid. But it will not lift the obligation. So the two that are valid but don't lift the obligation are what? Puberty and slave. Right? Hitting puberty and being free. These two. Meaning if you don't meet this condition, if you do it, it's accepted, but it doesn't lift the obligation. But it's not even wajib on you. Like we have a fifth condition, which is capability. Being able to. A person, he may be freed man, and he may have aql, he may be a Muslim, and he may have hit puberty, but he's not capable. Is it wajib upon him? No. Allah says, وَلِلَّهِ عَلَى النَّاسِ حِجُّ الْبَيْتِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ إِلَيْهِ سَبِيلًا. Whoever is مُسْتَطِيع. So what does capability mean? What does that look like? We're going to talk about it. طيب, number one, they say he has to have ownership of the necessary provisions and suitable transport for his standard. They say az-zad wal-rahila. What is zad? First thing is zad. Zad is what a person needs of food and drink and clothing for his journey to Hajj and to return. Like today, in our day, would be like the hotel cost, the accommodation, the food. These kind of costs that you pay for Hajj. Whatever it would cost is called your zad. You have to have enough for that. And also the rahila. And the rahila is the transportation that you take. For example, in our case, it would be flight. Right? Most people are flying. To go there and to return. So you have to have enough for all of this. But they say for rahila, for the transportation, it has to be salihah limithlihi. It has to be something that suits his standard. What does that mean? For example, a person, his whole life he travels by plane. Right? He never travels by boat. Like maybe a person, he can afford Hajj except he can't afford the plane ticket. Do we say now, if you're able to pay for a boat, you have to go by boat? No. Because normally he doesn't travel by boat. Does that make sense? So back then this would be more applicable, but today it's not really as relevant. But yeah. So these are two conditions. He has to have the zad. Basically, all the financial costs, he has to be able to afford it. And the wealth must be extra, beyond his own sufficiency, the sufficiency of those he supports in the books of knowledge that he needs. Meaning that any needs he has in his house, after he spends the cost of Hajj, he still has enough for these things. It's not like he comes back and he's broke, and then, no. He comes back and he's still in a decent financial state. And he's not required to sell things. Like for example, in his house he has furniture. He doesn't have to sell all his furniture. If I sell all my furniture, I'll be able to do Hajj. No, he's not required to do that. طيب. And we mentioned that this extra money, it must not disappear after Hajj. Meaning when you come back, you still have to be financially stable. طيب. That's the condition of qudra, capability. So if a person is not financially stable, he will not be able to. طيب, they also mention al-qudra bil-badan. You have to be physically able. If a person, he's not physically able, but he's financially able, what does he do? They say if it's a sickness that he's not going to recover from, for example, or a person of very old age, he knows he's not going to recover from, and he's never going to be able to do Hajj, he has to pay for someone to do Hajj on his behalf. No. What if he's not financially capable and he's not physically capable? There's no obligation. In today's day and age, that would fall under qudra. If you cannot get the visa and you cannot get these different things, that would fall under qudra. No. طيب, they mention a sixth condition. They say, وَمَحْرَمٌ لِمَرْأَةٍ فَمَنْ قَدَرْ فَلْيَطْلُبِ التَّفْصِيلَ مِمَّنْ يُعْتَبَرْ. He says the sixth condition is a mahram for a woman specifically. What is a mahram? I was going to make a joke, but it's okay. طيب. This is for women specifically. She has to have a mahram. What is a mahram? A mahram is either her husband or someone that she is not allowed to marry permanently, like her brothers, her uncles. These are people she's not allowed to marry ever, no matter what. That means there are some people that at the time she may not be allowed to marry, but later on she will be able to marry. That's not considered a mahram here. So here for her to be a mahram, it has to be either her husband or someone she cannot marry, like her brothers or her uncles, like that, her grandfather and so on. طيب. And this mahram of hers has some conditions. Number one, the mahram has to be a Muslim. Meaning we have a woman, she's a Muslim, but her father is not a Muslim. Can he be her mahram for Hajj? No. He cannot be a mahram for Hajj. طيب, but other madhahib, they disagree with this. طيب, and also, he has to have hit puberty. Meaning a lady, she has a small son. Can she bring him to Hajj? Is it going to be valid for a mahram? No. Right? But once he hits puberty, then he can be considered a mahram. طيب. Also, she has to pay for the mahram's Hajj and travel. طيب. So the mahram is not actually obliged to go with her. The mahram does not have to go with her. And he's not sinful. She has to pay for it. And if she cannot afford for his, then she's not obligated to go. But today, like the urf, the norm of the people is that the man is going to pay for the Hajj of the woman. Do not say to your wife, oh, I don't have to pay for you, you're not going to Hajj. No, take her to Hajj. طيب. But technically, shar'an, he's not required to pay for the Hajj of the woman. And he's not required to go with her. So if he doesn't go with her, she's not required to do Hajj. If she cannot find a mahram, she's not required to do Hajj. Well, then it's wajib upon both of them. And they both have to go. She has to pay for herself. He pays for himself because he has to do Hajj. But he should pay for her, of course, too. But it's not wajib, but he should still do that. طيب. أحيانا too much ilm can be fitna. Huh? You learn too much for Allah al-Musta'an. طيب. And then the Shaykh, he says, نعم. فَلْيَطْلُبِ التَّفْصِيلَ مِمَّنْ يُعْتَبَرْ. He says, let them seek detailed knowledge from those who are held in high esteem. Meaning the Shaykh is saying that whoever wants to do Hajj, he can seek the tafsil after. When he's able to do Hajj and when he's going to do Hajj, let him now learn the details. Because right now what we took in Hajj, this is literally like the first chapter to like 20 of Hajj. Hajj is a lot of sections. So this is just the beginning. So there's many details of Hajj we're not going to take in this small poem. But he's saying that a person who, now when he wants to do Hajj, all the other rulings he has to learn. Allah understand. Some people, this year, and last year, maybe many years, people, they go to Hajj and they did not ask a sheikh beforehand to do their research. And so what do? They went to ChatGPT and they start asking, what is the fiqh ruling of this? If I do that, is my Hajj valid? هذه مصيبة صراحة. Allah المستعان. نعم. So that should not be us. We should not do Hajj and start asking ChatGPT for fatawa. طيب. That's what the Shaykh, he mentions for Hajj. He didn't go into too much detail. Afterwards, he goes to the section of transactions or sales. طيب, he says فصل شروط صحة البيوع العلم بالثمن والمبيع. طيب, he's going to talk about conducting a sale, buying and selling. He's going to talk about the conditions. What are these conditions? Number one, before we get into that, I want to talk about what is the definition of buying. When we say bay', what does bay' mean? It means معاوضة مال بمال على وجه التأبيد. It means the permanent exchange of wealth or a lawful benefit for wealth or a lawful benefit. طيب, meaning على وجه التأبيد, it has to be permanently. For example, that would exclude like things like rent. For example, I say I'm going to give you this for this number of months. That would not be buying and selling. That would be renting. We're not talking about here. We're talking about permanent buying and selling. I have a product and you have something and we're going to trade it and you're going to own it and I'm going to own this. That's what we're talking about right now. طيب? And it can be different things. You can buy with money and buy a product. You can also buy a manfa'a, like a benefit, not something physical. Naam. And it can also be commodity for commodity. Like you have a car and I have a phone. Like a trade. طيب. Buying and selling, it has 3 pillars. In every sale, there are going to be 3 pillars. The first one is the aqid, the second one is the ma'qud, and the third one is a sigha. What is aqid? The aqid is the buyer and seller. There's no sale except that there's a buyer and a seller. You need both. طيب, the second one is the ma'qud, which is the thing that is being bought, the 2 products basically, or the money and the na'am. The thing that is being bought and the thing that is being used to buy that thing. Usually it's the product and the money. That's the third pillar. Meaning there's no financial buying and selling except with something being bought, something being sold. And the third one is a sigha. Sigha is like the expression that is used. For example, there are 2 ways to conduct a sale. Number one, it's either with speech. For example, someone says, I will sell you this. And they say, I buy it from you or I accept. That's valid. The second way is through action. Sometimes you may do a sale and you might not say a word. You go to the baqala, you give them the 2 riyals, you get the moya. No one says a word and khalas, you leave. Right? You have a product, you go to the cashier and you buy it. You don't say a word. Is that valid or do I have to say it? You don't have to say anything. This counts as sigha. طيب. But without a sigha, if there's no form of like actual interaction, there's no sale. طيب. Buying and selling, there are conditions. Just like we talked about conditions to be valid for the salah and for wudu, these have conditions to be valid. There are many conditions. Number one, the first condition is that the price and the product need to be specified and known. What does that mean? For example, someone has a product, he has a phone, and he says, you have a phone, and I say, I will buy your phone from you with whatever's in my pocket. Whatever money I have in my pocket right now, I'll buy the phone from you. Is it allowed? It's not allowed. Why? Because what's in my pocket is not known. You don't know it. So you have to know the price. And the product also has to be known. For example, a person, let's say he has like a mystery box. I say, I have a mystery box for you. I'll sell it to you for $100. In this mystery box, maybe like nothing, or maybe like gold. You don't know what's in the mystery box. Is that allowed? It's not allowed. You have to know what you are buying. طيب? So how do you know what you're buying? Either you see it or by description. For example, like a phone. You may not see it, you might buy it online. But you know all the descriptions, so there's no problem. You don't actually have to see it yourself. طيب, the other conditions he says, وَالْمِلْكُ عَاقِدٍ يَكُونُ جَائِزَ تَصَرُّفٍ وَكَوْنُ عَقْدٍ نَاجِزَ. He says number 3, ownership. You have to actually own the product and the money that you're buying and selling. For example, if you have a car, it's not even yours. Like we're in the parking lot, and Jad, he comes to me and says, you see this car? I'll sell it to you for $100,000. And I give him the money. And then I found that the car is not even his. Is it valid? It's not valid. Right? Because he doesn't own it. Also, if I stole money, for example, or I stole anything and I want to sell it or use that money to buy them, it's not valid. You have to own the money and the product. طيب. Number 4, he says, جائز التصرف. What is جائز التصرف? This is a condition for the buyer and the seller. The one buying and the one selling, there's 3 conditions that they have to meet. Okay, every person who's trading, buying and selling, there's 3 conditions you have to meet. What are they? Number 1, they have to be a free man, hur. Obviously in our day, it's not really going to apply. Why? Because the hur himself, any wealth that he owns belongs to his owner. So he cannot buy and sell. Unless his owner gave him permission, that's something else. طيب. The second one is mukallaf. We talked about mukallaf. What does it mean? Mukallaf means it's 2 things. It's bulugh and aql. It means that he's sane and hit puberty. Meaning mukallaf means legally responsible. So a person who did not hit puberty or is not sane cannot buy and sell. Does that mean my 5-year-old son, he can't go to the store and buy a piece of chocolate or something small? They make an exception. They say if it's something small amount of money, it's allowed for the one who has not hit puberty. And also they mention, or if his guardian allowed him. For example, someone has a son and he gives his son this amount of money and he says you can buy and sell with it. If he got permission from his guardian, he's allowed. But other than that, for example, a kid, he takes like $10,000 from his dad and then he starts buying stuff. That sale is not valid. طيب. The next one is that a person has to be Rashid. Rashid is the opposite of what we call Safih. Right? What does this mean? الذي لا يحسن التصرف. So Rashid is a person who يحسن التصرف. He knows how to trade and he's good with money. Doesn't mean you have to be like financial expert, but a person who just has no idea how to use money. For example, you give a person $10,000 and one day he spent it all on like nonsense. This would be someone who's Safi. He cannot handle money. And usually it's someone young, right, that cannot handle money. The sale would not be valid from them. So these are the 3 conditions for the person who is buying and selling. They have to meet these conditions. Or someone who, for example, is very naive. You go to him and you say, listen, I have this product. It's actually worth $1 million or like $100,000. And you convince him, or you have a Pokemon card, for example, you're like, listen, it's actually worth $10,000. In reality, it's worth like $5. And he's gullible, right? That bait is not valid. Al-hur, he has to be free man. And the second one is mukallaf. He has to hit puberty and be sane. طيب. Then he says, it has to be وَكَوْنُ عَقْدٍ نَاجِزًا. The contract, it cannot be contingent on a future event. What does that mean? For example, I say to you, I will sell you this for $500 if France wins the World Cup. It's based on something in the future. Am I allowed to do that? You're not allowed to make a condition like that. Based on something that's going to happen in the future. You cannot do that. It has to be now. And this doesn't mean you can't defer payment. You can't say, I make this trade with you, but you can pay me later. That's different. But this is when you're making the condition on something in the future. Now. Not necessarily, no. Does that fall under this?
Oh, it has to be a.
It's not bay'ah. That can be maybe fall into gift, hiba. No. طيب. Then he says, رضا وقدرة على التسليم خلو معقود من التحريم. He says mutual consent. There has to be رضا, mutual consent. Meaning one party cannot be forced. For example, a person is forced to sell something, he doesn't want to sell it. The bay' is not valid. Huh?
I have a question.
Oh.
So let's say you're selling something, but you didn't even know the value of what you were selling. But I know what it is. You sell me for 100, but it's worth 1,000, and then later on I sell it for whatever. Is that still a valid transaction?
Say the scenario again.
You're selling something, but you don't know its true value.
Me, yeah.
Yeah.
And so you buy it from me for a
But I
cheap
know.
price.
I buy it for 100, but I know it's worth 1,000. Is that a valid transaction?
I'm not sure. I don't know. نعم. He says وقدرة على التسليم. That means the product, you have to be able to hand it over. It has to be deliverable. What does that take out? For example, you have a phone, but you lost it. Or it got stolen. And you tell someone, listen, I'm going to sell you my phone, but I just don't have it. It's lost. Stolen. I don't know where it is right now. Is that allowed? No, you have to actually be able to hand it over. طيب. The next one he says, خُلُو مَعْقُودٍ مِنَ التَّحْرِيمِ. It has to be free of anything haram, meaning the product itself cannot be haram. What is haram? Like instruments. You cannot sell or buy instruments. Haram. The bay is not even valid. For example, khamr, wine. You cannot buy wine. You cannot. Naam. طيب. And then he says, those are the conditions for transactions. Then he says, وَيَحْرُمُ الرِّبَا وَبَيْعُ الْغَرَرِ وَأَخْذُ مَالٍ دُونَ حَقٍّ قَدْ دُرِي. He talks about certain transactions that are forbidden, certain things that are forbidden. He says number one is riba. In transactions involving gharar. This is two. Number one is riba, number one is transactions involving gharar. And number three, the unjust taking of wealth. طيب, three things. Number one, he says, al-riba. What is riba? Riba is very long, but in short, we have riba, they translate as usury or interest. We have two types of riba. Alright, and riba is from the major sins. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the person who does riba, فَأْذَنُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. Let him know that Allah has declared war upon him. Allah and His Messenger have declared war upon him. The person takes riba. So riba is from the major sins and is not something light. There are two types of riba. We have riba with loans and we have riba with transactions. What is riba with loan? A riba with loan is when you give someone a loan, for example, for $10,000, and what he gives you back is going to be more than what you loaned him. He's not allowed to give you back more than what you learned. He has to give you that amount. طيب, what if I give him 10,000 and he gives me 10,000 and he gives me like a pair of shoes? Not money, but like shoes or something. It's still riba. Anything that brings benefit. It doesn't have to be money, it can be anything. طيب, if that was stipulated in the contract that he has to give me more, that's considered riba. Or if it was understood, like we didn't explicitly say it, but it was understood that, oh, you're going to give me more, that's also riba. It's different if it's a gift. They mention if a person wants to give a gift, that has a different ruling. I don't remember exactly the exact ruling, but there's details to it. Social. It doesn't have to be physical. Yeah, it doesn't have to be physical. No. For example, you say, I'm going to give you 10,000. He's going to give you 10,000 back and he's going to give you some type of benefit. Like maybe he owns a gym. He says, I'm going to give you free membership. That would be riba. Now, if he wants to do it as a gift, that's something different. طيب. So that's riba with loans. So if you give a loan, you cannot ask for more back. You have to take the same amount back. Naam.
That's not going to be $10,000. Would that be permissible?
I'm not sure. Allahu a'lam. طيب. I wouldn't do that though. I would do the Umrah and get your money. طيب. The next type of riba is in transactions. We said this riba was in what? Loans. Now we have riba in transactions. طيب. What does that mean? Riba, when it comes to buying and selling, can only be in three things. Okay? It can be in money, which includes gold and silver. Gold, silver, and currency. You can have riba in this. And you can also have riba in things that are weighed or things that are measured. These are three categories. So if it's not something that is weighed or not something that is measured or it's not money, there's not going to be riba in it. What does riba in transactions look like? There's two types. Either what they call riba al-fadl or riba al-nasi'ah. Riba al-fadl is when the amount is not equal. And riba al-nasi'ah is when the payment is not in the same gathering. Okay? We're going to explain now. What are the possible scenarios? Let's say a person has dates. It's something that is weighed. So there can be riba in this. And another person has dates. And they want to trade dates. Okay? For example, you have dates are measured in volume. Okay, so you have 10 kilograms of dates, I have 10 kilograms of dates. طيب. If we want to trade dates, it has to be in the same sitting in the same amount. Okay? If the amount is different, for example, I give you 10 kilograms of dates and you give me 11, that's riba. That's riba al-fadl, riba in the amount. You cannot do that. Even if your quality dates are more high quality than mine. No, because they're the exact same thing, it has to be the same amount and it has to be in the same gathering. You cannot also say, I'll give you these dates, you give me your 10 later. No, it has to be in the same gathering. طيب. Because these are both measured in volume and they're both the exact same thing. They're both dates. طيب, what if we have things that are measured in volume, but they're different things? For example, a person has dates, they're measured in volume, right? A person has raisins, also measured in volume, they want to trade. Okay? Do I have to do it in the same sitting and does it have to be the same amount of volume? It has to be in the same sitting, but not the same amount of volume. For example, you have 15 kilograms of raisins, I have 10 kilograms of dates. I give to you, you give to me. Is it valid? It's valid. Here we don't need the same amount. The same amount is only when they're the exact same thing. Okay? But it has to be in the same sitting. Meaning I can't say, here's 15 kilograms of raisins, give me 10 kilograms of dates tomorrow. It's not allowed. It has to be in the same sitting. So if they're the exact same thing, it has to be, we need both. It has to be in the same gathering and it has to be the same amount. What if they're both things that from the same category, as in they're both weighed or they're both measured in volume, but they're not the exact same thing? Like we mentioned dates and raisins, you only need one condition, which is what? Same gathering, not the same amount. طيب. What if you have something with volume, like dates with money? Because we said the third category is with money. It doesn't need to be the same amount and doesn't need to be in the same setting. That's fine. طيب, and the same thing with weight. Let's say we have something. Naam. So even in this case with volume, if you have something that's measured in volume and something that's measured in weight. What's something that's measured in weight? Let's say meat. Someone has meat, another person has dates, and they want to make a trade. Does it have to be in the same sitting? And does it have to be the same amount? No. It cannot even be the same amount because one is measured in volume, one is measured in weight, and it doesn't have to be in the same sitting. So basically, if they're both things that are measured in volume, or they're both measured in weight, they're from the same category, and it's the same exact item, they're both dates, or it's both meat, right? Two people have meat and they want to trade. You have to have both conditions. It has to be the same amount in the same sitting. طيب, if it is from the same category, both measured in volume, but they're different products. One has dates and the other has raisins. We said same sitting. طيب, you guys get the idea. And the same thing with weight, the same idea. طيب, what about with money? طيب, with money, we said if it's the same thing, for example, gold and gold, silver and silver, it has to be the same amount and it has to be the same sitting. Okay? If I have gold and you have gold, and I have 10, whatever, I have like 1 kilogram and you have 2 kilograms. Can we trade? No. It's not allowed to trade because you have more than me. That would be riba. It has to be in the same gathering. What about silver and silver? Same thing. Okay, what about now gold and silver? What about that? It has to be in the same gathering but not the same amount. You guys got it? It has to be the same gathering but not the same amount. This is called riba al-fadl. So today this would apply to us with what? Like, let's say money. Person has cash. Another person has silver. What do you guys think? What is if they're different amounts, is it valid? It's valid. But it has to be in the same gathering. Like, you guys got it? That's the riba. The main riba that we would come across in our day-to-day age is riba and ad-duyun, in the loans. So that's more important. طيب, then he says bay al-gharar. What is gharar? Gharar is any selling or buying when there's major uncertainty about what is being sold. Right? There's uncertainty about the sale. For example, like we gave the example of the mystery box. You don't know what's in it. You're not allowed to buy that. It's called gharar. So when you don't know what you're getting, it's haram. It's not allowed. Like, there's some certainty that's forgiven. Like, you cannot have 100% certainty of a product. For example, a watermelon. The inside of a watermelon, you're not going to know, like, how does it look? So can I buy the watermelon or do I have to open it and see? No, you don't have to see. Mm. Allah alam, madhi. You have to ask Sheikh John or someone. طيب. The last one he mentions is, what does he say? He says the unjust taking of wealth. Obviously, like stealing these things is not haram, is not allowed. Naam. And also, selling something that is haram. Right, we mentioned this. For example, pig. Someone wants to sell a pig or buy a pig, it's not allowed. Naam. طيب. And then he says, فصل النكاح. Everyone woke up. فصل في النكاح. He's talking about now marriage. He only mentions one line. He says, فصل النكاح أوجب النكاح لمن يخاف دونه السفاحة. طيب, he says marriage is obligatory for the one who fears fornication, he fears zina without it. A person, he fears that he will fall into zina if he does not get married. What's the ruling for him to get married? It's wajib. If you feel you're going to fear zina. طيب, what about a person who doesn't fear that he's going to fall into zina? Is it wajib? No. طيب, they mentioned there's different rulings. Nikah can have different rulings. Right? For the person who has desires, but he does not fear zina, like it did not reach that point, for him it is sunnah. It's mustahab, recommended. The one who fears zina and has desire, it is wajib. Like, what about the one who has no desire? He doesn't have desire, some people. It's mubah, it's permissible. No. Like, here they mention a masala. What about marrying more than one wife? What's the ruling? What do you guys think? Sunnah? Wajib? يا شيخ احنا في امريكا مو مصر يا شيخ. ها؟ Yes and no. What do you guys think? The asl, the default ruling of marrying more than one wife, is that it's not recommended to marry more than one wife. The women are very happy, mashallah. It's not recommended to marry more than one wife. They say it's better to stay with one wife. But they mention if the desire will not be satisfied except with more than one, some people may need more than one, then for him is different. But the asl is that it's recommended to stick with one wife if he doesn't need more than one. طيب, he says, and alhamdulillah, we're basically done. He says, يحرم إقدام من المكلف على أمور حكمها لم يعرف. He said, it is forbidden for a mukallaf, we talked about mukallaf, the person who reached puberty and is sane, to undertake matters without knowing the ruling. A person cannot go into something if he doesn't know the ruling. You cannot buy and trade if you do not know the rulings associated to what you're doing with. هذا haram. And then a person may say, oh, I didn't know, and use that as an excuse. No, it's not allowed. It's not allowed. That doesn't mean he needs to be a scholar in whatever he's doing. He needs to know every detail. No, but he needs to know the basics, right? And if there's certain issues, he can go back to the people of knowledge. But in general, you should not go into anything except you know the ruling of it, right? That means what? What are things we always go into that we have to go into, that we have no choice? Salah. That means we have to learn the rulings of salah, right? As zakah. If a person has to pay zakah, he has to pay zakah. He needs to learn the rulings. And hajj, and we mentioned these things. طيب. He says, فَحَصِّلِ الْعُلُومَ وَاسْأَلْ أَهْلَهَا فِي الْوَاجِبَاتِ وَاحْذَرَنَّ جَهْلَهَا. He said, so acquire knowledge and consult its scholars with regards to the obligations and beware of ignorance against them. The Shaykh is encouraging everyone to learn knowledge in فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. نعم. And then he says, he ends with the statement, يا رب حسن الفعل والختام والحمد لله على التمام. He says, oh Lord, grant us righteous deeds and a good ending, and all praise is due to Allah for the completion of this poem. The Shaykh, he ends with thanking Allah, just like he started by thanking Allah, because a person, the fact that he was able to start this nadhm, this poem, is a blessing from Allah, and the fact that he was given the success to finish it is a blessing of Allah. There are scholars in Islam who they started works, like a book, and they not get to finish it. Maybe they died or something happened, they did not finish it. So the fact that you're able to start something like this and finish it, for those of you who attended, it is also a blessing of Allah that He allowed you to attend and He allowed you to complete this poem. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. And we mentioned that This poem, we took it in 2 days and some things we had to rush over, but this is an introductory poem into the Ḥanbalī madhab. If you think you learned this and now you know fiqh, Allah, you know like 1%. This poem is like 1% there. So many things he did not talk about and so many details he did not go into that a person, if he wants to learn more, he should learn these things, and he will find them in the larger books. This is a small poem, but there are big books that are greater than this and bigger than this, and if he studies them, he will find more rulings. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. We'll stop here. Are there any questions?
I was gonna ask you on the marriage thing. What was the second thing you said?
What do you mean?
The first thing you said was that it's
Yes, if a person fears zina, are you talking about marrying more than one wife?
I just wanna
Yes.
kind of like get the connection between the verse and like the second part of like you have married two and so on and so forth. Like, where's the connection between?
نعم. What was the ayah? نعم. So they have evidences for mentioning that it's sunnah to marry one. And you have to look at the ayah, you also have to look at hadith and different things. I don't remember exactly what their proof is for it being recommended to marry one. But one of the things they mention is that you don't break the heart of the woman. So that's something they mention. Of course, they have evidences, but they mention that if he needs to, it's recommended for him to marry more than one. Some people, they need more than one. But if you don't need it, it's better to stick to one. But in any case, you're between sunnah and doing something that's not sunnah. It's not like if you do it, it's haram.
When you said fear zina, you meant the actual act itself, not the other types that come with it?
Yes, the actual act itself. He actually fears zina. Yeah. I mean, if he literally fears he will fall into zina, pressure, and in that case, Allah will fall under the second category. It's mustahab.
Say you like always fear zina, because like you don't want to like shaitan can do anything.
What if zina fears you?
It's possible.
طيب.
Yeah, like no, genuinely though, like what if you like say
If a person genuinely fears zina, he has to get married. He has to get married.
but like would that mean that like you have to actively be in
If he's not trying to get married or getting married, he's sinful. That's what it means. If he cannot find a spouse and he's looking, putting his effort, but he just cannot find, obviously he's not going to be held accountable because he's doing his part. But if he fears zina and he's not doing anything, not trying to get married, that's a problem. No.
You said it was sunnah to just marry one wife and not have more than one wife.
Yes. They say it's better to marry one wife. Yeah.
Is that because of modern times that now women are accepting more than
No. This is not in modern times. No. Even back then they say sunnah.
Sahaba had more than one wife at a time. Most of them had. Not all of them, most of them did. Ali being an exception because of the stipulation Prophet put for him, but Muslim had more than one wife at a time. So I mean,
Allah Alam. I'm not sure of the evidence for this, but they mention I can look back to it, inshallah. I can get back to you if we're able to. No. We'll end here. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك ونشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت ونستغفرك ونتوب إليك جزاكم الله خيرا السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته